Hey there, anime enthusiasts. Welcome to Multifiction, your go-to channel for a whirlwind of captivating stories, exciting characters, and boundless imagination. Let's dive into the world of anime together, where every tale is a new adventure waiting to unfold. Stay tuned for an anime experience like never before, right here on Multifiction. But wait, did you know that a whopping 84% of you watching right now haven't subscribed to my channel yet? By subscribing, you'll not only show your support for the content I create but also join a community of like-minded individuals on a quest. Don't miss out on future uploads and updates. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay connected. Chapter 1. Wednesday night. Just a general note. If there are any one-shots that lead into sex, both Deku and Todoroki are 18 or older in those stories. It was a crisp late summer night in Musutafu City, and Izuku, Deku, Midoriya was walking down Banezu Boulevard, having gotten the biggest shock of his life ever since he saw All Might in his usual form. Months earlier, Shoto Todoroki, one of the manliest and most handsome boys in Ua High's Class 1A, had revealed that he was in fact Shoko Todoroki. This had earned varying reactions from the rest of his, her, classmates, from Katsuki, Kachan, Bakugo yelling at her for not being upfront with him, to Minoru Mineta perving out, to all of the girls giving her their full support, with Momo Yaoyorozu and Kyoka Jiro being her biggest supporters. It had been an overwhelming day for Todoroki, but aside from the girls supporting her, perhaps the most meaningful support came from Deku, who told her how proud he was of her and promised to stand up against anyone who so much as thought of laying a finger on her. The first time he'd laid eyes on Todoroki, he'd found her somewhat attractive as a boy, more so at the sports festival when they were having their little chat before their match at the battle tournament, wondering why he couldn't control his heartbeat and his urge to sweat around her. However, he never imagined he'd find her strolling right next to him, her hair grown in a 60s-style flipped bob, with a figure to rival Yaoyorozu's, and quite frankly, he still wasn't sure how to handle this, but he did his best. "So, Todoroki, please, call me Shoko. Right. So anyways, I just wanted to say, I'm still trying to process you as a girl. I mean, I'm proud of you for being brave enough to reveal your true colors, but I'm really not good at the whole love thing. I'm not good at it, either. All I know is that your actions at the sports festival touched me like nothing else could, and I owe you a debt of gratitude for your help." Deku smiled nervously. I'm glad. Deku and Todoroki said nothing else as they strolled along the boulevard. One thing that Deku couldn't help but notice about the boulevard was that it was frequented by Furui Tetsu no Iko Ka, a subculture of people who imported old American cars, trucks and vans from the 60s to 70s and held cruise nights here. Though similar in principle to the Swedish Raggar, the Furui Tetsu no Iko Ka not only differed in their vehicles of choice, but also preferred to listen to 60s to 70s psychedelic rock, hard rock, blues rock and proto-metal. Some of the vehicles retained their left-hand steering wheels, but some were also converted to right-hand drive by an Australian company. Speaking of Australian, aside from the usual Chevy Camaros and Ford Econolines, some of them imported Australian cars such as Holden Moneros and Ford Falcons. To Deku, it was almost like being in a different world, and with Todoroki by his side, it felt that much more surreal. At one point, Todoroki gently tugged at Deku's hand, and they stopped. "Why are we stopping?" asked Deku. "This street light, it's so secluded. Isn't it romantic?" Before Deku could answer, Todoroki wrapped her arms around him and kissed him. Despite the heat rushing to his face along with the redness, he nevertheless wrapped his arms around her as well. For years, he had dreamed of being a hero just like All Might, but until he met Todoroki, he never once imagined that being a hero could mean doing something as simple as helping somebody to come to terms with their identity. Nevertheless, in this moment, he felt extremely proud of himself, knowing that he'd helped liberate a poor, unloved soul from the crushing oppressiveness that came not only from having to hide who she was, but also letting someone else define half of her quirk. That, and he also got a great deal of joy from experiencing her soft, sensitive side. Todoroki got a great deal of joy from kissing Deku, too. The first time she laid eyes on him, she thought he was the absolute cutest green bean ever. However, owing to the fact that she was masquerading as something she wasn't, she would have been hugely embarrassed to try to make any moves on him, not that she cared if people were going to mistake her for a gay man, but more so that he would have turned her down and told her that he wasn't into men. Now that she was free to share her feelings with him, she could feel her body tingling from the excitement of laying her affections on him. The more time she spent holding him, the closer she felt to him. Overall, this was heaven for both of them, though even heaven couldn't last forever, and eventually, they broke away from the kiss, but kept making eye contact with each other, smiling. "I love you, Midoriya. I love you too, Shoko. Also." Yes. Please, call me Deku. A cute nickname. How did you get it? Well, Kachan came up with it because he thought it was short for defenseless Izuku, but Uraraka told me how much she loved it, and since then, it's grown on me. Well, then you should keep using it. It suits you very well. Deku said nothing else, simply chuckling at Todoroki's kindness. Even if the future hadn't been written in stone, thus far, he felt the future was looking more hopeful with her by his side. Chapter 2. Failure is always an option. Deku and Todoroki rushed around a corner, having been forced into a hasty retreat by the League of Villains. The two heroes had prepared as well as they could, and they tried their best, but the League had a couple of trump cards up their sleeves. Both of them huffed and puffed as they tried to cool down. Looks like we've lost them for now, said Todoroki. Yeah, but they're still out there, looking for us, exclaimed Deku. Seriously, why do I even bother sometimes? Deku, it's okay. We're still alive, aren't we? Deku pounded his fist on the side of the building they were next to. No, I wasn't strong enough. I should have been able to beat them. Todoroki put a hand on Deku's shoulder. I understand you're angry, and you have every right to feel that way. Just know that you have a choice in this matter. You can choose to let this failure define you and cease to keep trying, or you can choose to look back on this as a learning experience and use that knowledge to do better next time. Deku said nothing, he merely shook his head. Todoroki wrapped her arm around him. I realize it's not so easy for you to deal with, but I promise you, I'll always be there for you, and I'll always love you. Shoko, finally, Deku turned around, and after making brief eye contact with Todoroki, he gave her a big hug and cried. Despite still being frustrated with the retreat he was forced to make, he just found her words so comforting and reassuring that he just couldn't help but be thankful that he had someone like her by his side to take solace in. After all those years of being quirkless, he wondered how he could have gone on so long without her to alleviate the pain of being bullied. Nevertheless, he tried not to lament the years without love so much as he tried to be grateful that she was there for him. He wondered if she was an angel. Whatever she was, he couldn't have asked for a better person to be with. Todoroki couldn't have asked for a better person to have in her arms, either. After Deku had given her the courage to use the hot portion of her quirk at the sports festival, she knew that he was the kind of guy that she wanted to be in love with, and now that she was here, giving him her love, she felt really good about herself, especially considering that she was giving him comfort in his hour of need. While she didn't have an intimate understanding of how much hurt the little green bean been through in the past, holding him in her arms, she felt that he must have felt really messed up inside to feel awful about something like this. Because of this, she elected to hold him in her arms as long as possible. He stopped crying at one point, but he too kept holding on to her. He did let go eventually, but not before both of them had gotten their fair share of comfort. I'll always love you, too, said Deku. Todoroki smiled and gave Deku some tissues, which he used to blow his nose and dry his eyes. Hey Deku, if it's all right with you, I'd like to take you out to dinner. I know this place that has really good katsudon. Deku gasped and smiled. I'd love to. Let's go. Deku and Todoroki held hands as they headed for the restaurant. Even if the League of Villains was still out there, at least he could rest easier knowing that he had the kindest, most beautiful girl by his side. Chapter 3. Romantic dinner. Todoroki took Deku to a small neighborhood restaurant called Karuichi Soba and more. It wasn't especially packed, though there were quite a few students studying on their laptops. This particular restaurant had a ticket machine in one corner where patrons ordered their food. After you. Deku gestured to the machine. Todoroki walked up to the machine and inserted a few yen. Some of the choices lit up based on how much she'd put in, so she inserted more until she had enough for her favorite, Zaru Soba, which she ordered along with a cup of Keeman tea. The machine spat out some change along with 2 food tickets in a separate tray. Deku went next, but then Todoroki gently grabbed his hand. Allow me to pay for your food, said Todoroki, you deserve it. Ah, thank you so much. Todoroki smiled, you're welcome. After Todoroki put some money in for Deku, he stepped up to order. Fortunately for him, this particular restaurant had katsudon on their menu, so he ordered that along with some sencha green tea. After Deku had collected his tickets, him and Todoroki took a couple of stools at the counter, being fortunate enough to find 2 adjacent seats. They then handed the tickets to one of the staff members at the counter. Thank you, said Deku and Todoroki. While waiting for their food, Deku and Todoroki made conversation. So, how long have you known about this place? Asked Deku. Actually, I discovered it 2 months ago while looking up places that serve Zaru Soba. One review mentioned that the katsudon here was really good, and I know you love that, so I made note of it just for you. You memorized this place just for me? Shoko, you're so sweet. Todoroki blushed. Well, I tried. By the way, has anyone told you that you look beautiful today? Todoroki averted her gaze. Oh, does that mean I don't look beautiful on other days? Deku laughed. What? Said Todoroki. Oh, you crack me up, said Deku. Seriously, though, what I meant to say was that you look especially beautiful today. How so? Well, I mean, it's not just the way the sun makes your hair glow, or the fact that you have a really nice body. It's the way I get lost in your differently colored eyes, the seductive breathiness in your voice when you tell me how you made note of this place just for me, the… Todoroki covered her face with her hands. Stop. Deku frowned. What's wrong? I'm glad you think so highly of me, but, I still don't know how to be a girl. Deku put a hand on Todoroki's shoulder and smiled. I dunno. I think you're doing an alright job of it so far. How? All my life, my father tried to make me into a boy, always pushing me during his training, and this girl stuff is still so confusing. I realize it's confusing, but if there's anything I learned from life, it's that there's no manual on how to go through it. Only you can decide how to be a girl. Todoroki uncovered her face. Alright, I'll try my best. I do, however, have another concern. What? Todoroki grabbed her well-endowed chest. I still feel funny knowing I have these. I will admit, however, it is liberating not to have to wear a binder anymore. I mean, I'd feel pretty funny, too, but hey, haven't lots of people felt funny during puberty, too? Todoroki nodded. That is a good point. By this time, Deku and Todoroki's food was ready, and they started eating. Deku let out a hearty when he took his first bite of katsudon. The way the panko breading made it crunch and the fact that the flavor practically took his senses to Mars meant that he had one response for Todoroki. This is really good katsudon. Shoko, I knew there was a reason I was so attracted to you. Todoroki swallowed some noodles and raised an eyebrow. I'm glad you're enjoying it, but, did you really know there was a reason? Deku laughed again. Why are you laughing? Said Todoroki. I am sorry. I just think you're so lovely. Todoroki stared at Deku briefly, but then broke out into a smile. Oh Deku, you're so cute. Todoroki wrapped her arms around Deku and ruffled the green bean's fluffy hair, causing him to giggle. Tell me, how long have you been attracted to me? Asked Deku. I have to be honest. Ever since I first saw you, I thought you were the cutest boy ever. Granted, the fact that I was still pretending to be a boy at the time made things very weird for me, but now that I don't have to pretend, I feel much more comfortable opening up to you. Deku put a hand on Todoroki's shoulder and smiled. Shoko, you shouldn't have to worry about what other people think of you just because of how you identify. As long as you're comfortable being yourself, that's what really matters. Todoroki averted her gaze, but continued smiling. I know. I was just worried that my father wouldn't accept me, you know? Deku nodded. I understand. By the way, I really love the way you did your hair. Why do you do it like that? Todoroki turned back to Deku. Well, I was watching this old movie, and one of the characters had her hair done like this, and I thought she was so pretty, and I just wanted to be as pretty as her. Deku wrapped an arm around Todoroki. Well, however pretty she was, I bet you're at least 1,000 times prettier. Todoroki cupped Deku's face in her hands. Deku, if you keep saying nice things to me, I'm going to kiss you. Deku's face turned bright red. You know, for somebody who's not sure how to be a girl, you're really good at flirting. Well, I do have a cute boy to thank for that. Without question, Todoroki kissed Deku. No matter how many times she kissed him, he still got that tingly, chilly feeling running up and down his spine, and he could never quite get enough of it. Even so, she broke away from it shortly thereafter. Why'd you stop? Asked Deku. As much as I love you, I also want to make sure our food doesn't go to waste. Before we continue eating, however, I also wanted to ask why you do your hair like that. Deku stroked his chin. I'm not sure. All I know is that it's easier to take care of like this. Keep it like that. It looks good on you. Deku giggled. Oh, Shoko. After Deku and Todoroki finished eating and drinking, they stared lovingly at each other for some time before leaving the restaurant. Hey, Shoko, yes? I can't thank you enough for taking me here. May I walk you back home? Todoroki smiled. I'm glad you asked. Please do. And so, Deku and Todoroki held hands as they walked back to Casa de Todoroki. At this time of the season, the sun was still sinking below the horizon later in the day, so there was plenty of light for the two lovebirds to walk by. As the sky gradually cast away its shades of yellow, Deku looked at Todoroki and couldn't help but notice how the sun's golden rays gave her bicolored hair an ethereal glow. When the green bean first saw her hair, he really thought that Snow White really went well with that wine red, so much so that he envied her. On the other hand, he was perfectly content with his own shade of dark green, and he figured that she would probably kill for that shade, too. One of these days, he vowed to ask her out just to watch the sunset, figuring maybe that she'd want to see it with him, too. Thinking on this, he also thought about how it had been a hell of a time since the two of them started going out. Even if she wasn't 100% accustomed to acting like a girl, he thought she was doing well at it so far, and he was confident that she would shine in womanhood. Granted, he didn't know what the future was going to be like, but he was hopeful that this woman, who at one point had been a fierce rival to him, would want to share in it with him. Soon enough, they reached La Maison de Todoroki. "Well, I guess this is good night," said Todoroki. Deku nodded. "I guess it is. But, there'll always be tomorrow, and the day after that, right?" Todoroki wrapped her arms around Deku. "Right." Once again, Todoroki kissed Deku. Compared to the kiss at Karuichi, this one lasted longer, the better for her to make him melt like butter. Despite wanting to pass out in her arms, he wanted more of her touch. Even so, she let go eventually. "Good night, my dear Deku. Good night, my dear Shoko." With that, Deku and Todoroki parted ways. Even if they'd had a narrow loss to the League of Villains, both parties felt that love would win the day in the end. Chapter 4. Mama Mama Mama, let me drive your car thus far. Today was another average morning for Deku. After being awakened by the sound of Danny Elfman's Batman theme from his alarm clock, he headed out to the dining room, where his mother Inko had already prepared him a breakfast of grilled fish, miso soup, steamed rice, tsukemono, nori and a green salad, plus a hot cup of green tea. "Hey, how's my little hero doing today?" asked Inko. Deku took his seat. "Ah, I had a weird dream last night, but other than that, I'm fine." Inko got a more serious look on her face. "Oh? What about?" Deku shrugged. "I honestly don't remember too much of it, but I remember it was like nothing I'd dreamed before." Inko smiled. "But you're still here today, aren't you? It was only a dream." Deku nodded and took a bite of his fish. Sure, it was only a dream, but those had to make him wonder sometimes. After breakfast, Deku took care of his dental hygiene and did his daily workout, which mainly consisted of push-ups, pull-ups and dumbbell curls. After that, he did nothing in particular. There were no classes scheduled for today, no special programs, no obligations in general. Knowing that he had all this free time to himself, Deku was at a loss as to what to do at first, but then when he fired up his computer, he decided to play GoldenEye on an N64 emulator. However, his GoldenEye ROM was unique in that it was modded, so the player was playing as All Might, and all the enemies and NPCs were replaced with villains and heroes that the symbol of peace had encountered in his travels. Because a keyboard and mouse just wouldn't do, he controlled the game using an N64 controller hooked up to the computer via a USB adapter. Even though he'd played the game several times over, it still gave him great joy to blow away KF7 wielding bad guys, and this mod was one of the things that kept it fresh. Then, while he was wasting enemies, he heard John Williams's Superman theme, which was the ringtone for his phone, so he paused the game and answered the phone. "Hello? Deku, it's Shoko." "Oh, good morning, Shoko. How are you?" "I'm doing all right. And you?" "I'm fine. Good to hear. Listen, I called because I was wondering if it was okay if I paid a visit to you." "Of course. Feel free to come on over. Thank you. I'll be there soon. Goodbye." "Bye." Deku hung up. Ever since that fateful kiss on the boulevard, there hadn't been a single person whom he'd been looking forward to seeing more than her, and now that she was paying a visit to him, he was looking forward to it that much more. He tried playing some more GoldenEye to while away the time until she got there, but considering that the mere thought of seeing her was causing his heart to race and his body heat to rise, it was very difficult to concentrate on the game. Nevertheless, he tried his best. Eventually, he heard knocking on his door. "Come in." Deku paused the game. The door opened, and Inko stepped in. "Izuku, one of your friends is here." Figuring it was who he thought it was, Deku headed for the door. Sure enough, Todoroki was waiting for him. "Deku." Todoroki gave Deku a big hug and kiss, which he gladly returned. "Glad to see you, Shoko. What brings you over here?" Todoroki dangled a set of keys. "I thought we could go for a little drive." "Oh, since when do you own a car?" "I've had it for a while. Now please, come along." After Deku had put on his shoes, Todoroki led him outside to her car. He gasped when he saw it, a Matador red 1972 Oldsmobile 98 Regency with a white vinyl roof. "Whoa, that is a nice car," said Deku. "Where did you get that?" Todoroki smiled. "I had it specially imported. Now, enough talk. Let's drive." Todoroki handed the keys over to Deku, who eyed them curiously. Are you sure you want me to drive?" Todoroki put a hand on Deku's shoulder. Of course I'm sure. Besides, I trust you more than anyone else. Deku smiled nervously. Well, okay. Deku hopped in the driver's seat of the big Oldsmobile, buckling his seatbelt like a good little green bean, and Todoroki sat next to him. He smiled as the velour seating caressed his body. After that, he fired up the engine and got quite a rush from hearing that 455 rocket V8 sound. After taking in the mighty V8 for a few seconds, he put the car in drive and drove off. At first, he was quite nervous about handling such a slab of American iron on tight Japanese roadways, but as time went on, he grew to appreciate not only how responsive the gas pedal was, but also how smoothly the car drove. Hey, thanks for letting me drive, said Deku. This handles really well. Yeah, and it's really luxurious, isn't it? I'll say. By the way, do you mind if I listen to the radio? I don't usually listen to the normal radio stations, but since you're driving, I'll allow it. Great. Deku turned on the radio and tuned it until he found the station he was looking for. Hey, it's Moriko in the midday on 78.5 JOHY, Shizuoka's #1 classic rock station. Here's Foghat covering an old Muddy Waters tune. I just want to make love to you. Deku smiled as the song came on. He'd always loved classic rock, and Foghat was one of those bands that was always good with him. While Todoroki was more into heavy metal, she thought this song was pretty good, and she understood why he loved it so much. There they were, cruising through the streets of Musutafu, taking in the sights. Despite running into a bit of traffic in addition to a few red lights, neither of them felt extremely frustrated. After all, they had no place in particular to go today, so there was no rush. Besides, Deku was really enjoying the fact that Todoroki's car was getting more than a few looks from pedestrians. Hey, Deku, yes? If you don't mind, there's some place I wanted to show you. Where? Just follow my directions. First, we turn left at this next light. Deku obeyed Todoroki's directions. In due time, their course took them out of the city, through smaller towns such as Fujita and into the countryside, the radio playing songs such as Photograph by Def Leppard, Girls Got Rhythm by AC/DC and Looks That Kill by Motley Crue. While Deku was still getting his fair share of enjoyment out of driving Todoroki's car, he had to wonder just where she was taking him. Then again, she did say that she trusted him, and if that was the case, then he was probably better off trusting her as well. Eventually, Todoroki's directions led them to a dirt path that went to a secluded area in the forest. Park here, said Todoroki. Deku put the Oldsmobile in park and shut off the engine. What are we doing here? Deku unbuckled his seatbelt. Todoroki unbuckled as well. This is a spot I always go to when I want peace and quiet. Of course, now that you're here. Todoroki wrapped her arms around Deku and laid him down on the bench seat as she kissed him. There was no question in his mind where she wanted to go with this, but of course, he was more than willing to let her have his way with him. Chapter 5. Hero Days, Disco Nights. Todoroki sat at her vanity, wearing a white thigh-high dress, applying makeup. At first, after outing herself, she'd never thought much about makeup, but now that she was with Deku, she spent time learning how to apply it, with a good deal of training coming from her sister Fuyumi. On a night like tonight, she was obsessive about applying it, mainly because she wanted everything to be perfect for her little green bean. Tonight, he had invited her to Club 1186, one of the hottest discos in Musutafu City. Ordinarily, she didn't think much of disco music, but he had told her how much it would mean to him if he had somebody to go with, and since she loved him very much, she agreed to go with him. While Todoroki was still applying her makeup, she heard somebody knocking at her bedroom door. Hold on a minute, said Todoroki. Sis, your boyfriend's here, said Fuyumi. Tell him to wait a minute. Gotcha. Todoroki tried to apply her remaining makeup as quickly as possible, but also tried to be neat, too. Fortunately, she managed to do so without messing up, and she headed for the door. There was Deku, wearing a brown suit with black pinstripes, a white button-down shirt and a black bow tie. She smiled when he saw him. Deku, you look very handsome tonight, said Todoroki. Deku giggled. Speak for yourself. You look stunningly beautiful. Todoroki blushed, but kept smiling. You're so sweet. Now enough delaying, let's go. Deku and Todoroki headed to Club 1186. Formerly the Horikoshi Theater, it had been converted into a disco in 1979 and had survived throughout the rise and fall of disco by catering to different groups. The lobby was basically unchanged from the building's theater days, save for some neon lighting around the admissions desk. After paying their entry fees, Deku and Todoroki headed for the dance floor. Ever since they'd approached the front door of the club, they could feel the music beckoning them to the dance floor thanks to the club's gray bar sound system. In the lobby, the music was starting to fill them up, and by the time they got to the dance floor, it was really taking them higher. The lighting system was something to behold. A series of disco balls of varying sizes hanging at different heights above the dance floor, plus a green laser shining at random disco balls in sync with the music. As if that weren't enough, the walls were dotted with small strobe lights that sparkled in random patterns, also in sync with the music. Speaking of the music, the DJ's current selection was Deliverance by Space. Granted, the song was currently in the slow piano-laced intro phase, but it was enough to entice Deku and Todoroki to the dance floor. Once that disco beat kicked in, the laser started cycling faster, and Deku and Todoroki really got up and boogied. Despite having been a fan of disco music for a few years now, Deku had always been too shy about going to a club, feeling that it would be silly to go by himself, but now that he had Todoroki to dance with, it gave him great joy. He didn't mind that tonight was one of those nights where the club was really hopping, either. After all, nobody paid any particular attention to either of them, so they were free to dance and get lost in the music and lights. Right now, he was having the time of his life, and the more he danced with her, the more he wanted to come back on some other night. Todoroki was really enjoying herself, too. What she really loved about the experience was how the music spoke to her. Hearing the repeated chants of Deliverance, it reminded her of how Deku gave her deliverance from the inhibitions she had in regards to the hot portion of her quirk, which led to her finding the courage to out her true identity to the rest of her class. Sure, heavy metal had always been her greatest love when it came to music, but this disco song was really speaking to her in ways that metal never had. Given how much she was enjoying dancing with her beau as well, she decided that disco was a genre of music she could really get into. Deku and Todoroki danced for at least a couple of hours before deciding to call it a night. They exited Club 1186 holding hands with each other, smiles on their faces. Deku, thanks for taking me tonight. This was one of the best times I've ever had. Actually, I should be thanking you, Todoroki. For such a long time, I was hoping that I could find somebody to come to this place, and now that I had you to come along with me, I want to go back. Todoroki wrapped her free arm around Deku. You and me both. Once again, Todoroki kissed Deku. While he enjoyed her kisses regardless, the fact that he could still feel the music within him made this one that much more sensual. She held on to him for quite a bit of time before letting go. Deku, would you like to come back to my place? Deku frowned. I would, but what would your father think? Todoroki smiled. Who says he needs to know? Besides, he's out of town on business. Deku's smile returned. Good point. I accept. Todoroki said nothing else as she took Deku's hand and they headed back to her place for the night. Chapter 6. Die with Your Boots On today had started off like any other day in New York City for Deku and Todoroki, that is, until they boarded the subway at the Mt. Eden Avenue station. At some point between the Bronx and Manhattan, a group of 4 men wielding AKM assault rifles had brought the train to a halt and held all the passengers hostage. Their demand was simple. The NYC government was to pay them $10 million, or they would kill one hostage every minute the money was late. Supposedly, the mayor agreed to pay the ransom, but in reality, it was a trap set up by the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit to ensnare the terrorists. Thus far, in spite of the imminent threat to their lives, Deku and Todoroki managed to remain calm. In Deku's case, he had faith that somehow, both he and Todoroki would get out of this alive. As for Todoroki, she kept her cold as ice demeanor about her as usual. Suddenly, a burst of machine gun fire rang out from somewhere in the subway tunnel, and various people on the train panicked, wondering just what was going on. A couple of terrorists fired back, filling the subway with the familiar AK chatter. For one hot New York minute, the tunnel sounded more like Vietnam than the Big Apple, and most of the hostages kept losing their minds even after the shooting stopped. All of you, shut up, shouted one of the terrorists. Shut up now. The hostages who had been screaming their lungs out did as they were told. You, conductor. The same terrorist, presumably the leader, shook his AKM at the conductor. Out of the train, now. The conductor, a man of average build with brown hair and a goatee, raised his hands and complied with the leader's order. He made it a few yards before the terrorist shot him in the back with a brief burst, causing a bunch more people to scream. Despite this, Deku and Todoroki remained calm throughout the ordeal. Holding each other's hands definitely helped. Attention! Whoever's in the train, this is Sergeant Gershon Makawa of the NYPD, said a voice from within the tunnel. We're sorry about the shooting, and we're bringing the money over. No tricks, we promise. There better not be any tricks, or another hostage will die, said the terrorist leader. Sergeant Makawa began to approach the train, holding a large gym bag full of money. Remove your service pistol before you approach, said the leader. Makawa slowly drew his Glock 17 from its holster and dropped it between the train tracks. He then approached the train slowly, praying that the terrorists' leader wouldn't tear him apart with 600 rounds per minute of 7.62 by 39 mm lead. The hostages all looked on with a mix of fear and hope as well. Fortunately for Makawa, he was able to make it to the train and hand over the money. "Thank you for your cooperation," said the leader. "Now if you'll excuse us." Another terrorist at the train's controls set the train in motion. "Wait!" exclaimed Makawa. "This wasn't part of the deal." "Tisk tisk, deals are meant to be broken," said the leader. Various people on the train freaked out when the train set off, so the leader fired his AKM at the ceiling. "The next person who screams is going to get shot," said the terrorist's leader. "Is that clear?" Everyone else did their best to suppress screaming lest they receive 7.62 by 39 mm death. "Good," said the leader. "It's been fun, but we'll have to get off here. See you never." The four terrorists hopped off the train near the next station before it started picking up significant speed. "What's going on?" said one passenger. "Is anyone even driving?" said another. "We're gonna die," screamed another. Todoroki got up from her seat and flashed an NYPD detective's shield. "Nobody's going to die. I'm a cop. Deku, stop the train. I'm going after the terrorists." "Right." Todoroki tucked and rolled as she hopped off the train, while Deku flashed his own detective's shield. "All right, everyone, I'll do my best to stop the train," said Deku. "Please, try to remain calm." Everyone watched as Deku headed for the engine and discussed the situation amongst themselves. Stopping the train seemed easy enough, that is, until Deku got to the controls and not only discovered that the motorman was laying on the floor with his throat slit, but the terrorists had sabotaged the dead man's switch. "Alright, keep your cool, Izuku, I'm sure you'll figure this out." Meanwhile, Todoroki was running through the subway tunnel, chasing after the terrorists. She detached an Uzi from its DeSantis rig concealed beneath her M65 field jacket and brought it to bear. "NYPD, freeze!" shouted Todoroki. Instead of freezing like they were supposed to, the terrorists raised their AKMs at Todoroki and attempted to blow her away. Fortunately, she blocked their bullets with an ice shield and returned fire. In comparison to the terrorists, she had better aim, killing two and hitting a third in the leg. Not wanting them to get away, she started ice surfing in an attempt to catch up. She easily caught up to the terrorist who'd been shot in the leg, but his accomplice was nowhere to be found. "Halt!" shouted Todoroki. The terrorist dropped his rifle and immediately put his hands up. "Get on your knees and interlock your hands behind your head." The terrorist complied with Todoroki's orders, and she patted him down before handcuffing him. She then lowered her Uzi and pulled out a Motorola handheld radio. 44 Squad 9 to Central, said Todoroki. 44 Squad 9K. Central, I've eliminated 2 suspects and have apprehended a third. My partner is still on the train, and I'm at the corner of East 149th Street and 3rd Avenue. Suddenly, Todoroki's train of thought was interrupted when a Peterbilt towing a tanker trailer nearly ran her down. Feeling that the terrorist's leader was the one driving, and thinking quickly, she grabbed onto the trailer and climbed up the ladder on the back. Trying to maintain her balance as well as she possibly could, she walked towards the front of the tractor trailer. While Todoroki was attempting to stop the terrorist's leader, Deku was still trying to figure out how to repair the dead man's switch. All he could see was that a bunch of wires had been cut, so he would have to find out which one went where in order to get the train to stop. It seemed easy enough, but he was no electrician, so he had to analyze the wires carefully, and considering how much speed the train was picking up, that was easier said than done. Nevertheless, Deku figured that he could do it sooner rather than later, considering that he had a penchant for success if he just analyzed something hard enough. He grabbed the wires and was about to set on connecting them properly when, "What are you doing?" said a middle-aged woman. "Our lives are in danger and you're just fiddling around." "Ma'am, please remain calm and go back to your seat," said Deku. "I'm doing my best to fix this mess." "Fine." The woman grumbled as she shuffled back to her seat, while Deku continued trying to figure out which wire went where. Sweat dripped down his forehead, knowing that if he didn't do it in time, then the train would crash and people would die. Soon enough, though, he managed to figure out the correct way to connect the wires. Getting them connected, however, was a whole other matter, so he headed back to one of the train cars. "Hey, does anyone have any electrical tape?" asked Deku. "Yo, catch." A Con Ed worker tossed Deku a roll of electrical tape, and he rushed back to the engine and did his best to reattach the wires. Fortunately, he got them reconnected, thereby reactivating the dead man's switch and bringing the train to a halt. Yes. After pumping his fist, Deku returned to the car he was previously in. "Is everyone okay?" asked Deku. People gave affirmative responses despite being really shaken up. "Stay here," said Deku. I'm going to get some help." While Deku was going to get help, Todoroki was still on top of the tanker trailer, trying to catch the terrorists' leader. However, it wasn't easy keeping her balance, for the driver attempted to swerve about every which way but loose. Realizing that standing was more likely to result in her falling off, she got down on her hands and knees, crawling towards the front of the rig. Despite being afraid of becoming road pizza, Todoroki kept her cool about her, refusing to back down even for a millisecond. Despite her best efforts to make it to the truck part, though, the leader eventually swerved so hard that Todoroki was thrown aside. She managed to catch onto the lip of the roof of the tanker trailer, but it was clear that if she didn't do something quickly, then she would get thrown off. Looking around, she focused her gaze on the truck, and then, she shot a burst of flames at the rear tires. The terrorist leader took notice of this and shook the rig around wildly in an attempt to extinguish the flames. Recognizing that her grip wouldn't hold forever, Todoroki let go and started ice surfing, seconds before the tanker swerved so wildly that it actually flipped over. She hurried to the overturned rig, a Smith & Wesson Model 29 drawn. The terrorist's leader emerged, largely unhurt but clearly shaken up. Todoroki pointed her .44 at him. "This is where it ends, Tamura Shigaraki." Tamura Shigaraki chuckled as he removed his gloves. "You're so naive, officer. This is where it ends for you." Shigaraki touched the truck in an attempt to disintegrate everything around him. However, Todoroki blew his head clean off, thereby putting an end to the plot. Knowing that leaving the tanker trailer unattended would likely result in a huge fire and explosion, she froze it before calling to Deku on her radio. Shoko to Deku. "What's up, Shoko? I killed Tamura Shigaraki, the leader. Did you stop the train?" "I did. Where are you?" Todoroki looked around. "I'm at the corner of East 149th Street and Walton Avenue." "Okay, I'll be there as soon as possible." Not too long after, Deku showed up. "Shoko, are you okay?" Todoroki nodded. "I'm fine. I have to be honest, I couldn't have asked for a better man as my partner." Deku smiled. "I couldn't have asked for a better woman, either." Deku and Todoroki wrapped their arms around each other and kissed each other. Shortly thereafter, a bunch of NYPD and FDNY units showed up. A black male NYPD officer approached the two. "Whoa, what a mess," said the officer. "It couldn't be helped," said Todoroki. "Hey Matthews, we stopped the train," said Deku. "Let Central know that the hostages are somewhere between the 86th and 77th Street stations." Officer Ken Matthews gave a thumbs up. "Will do." Even if not everything had gone according to plan, Deku and Todoroki could at least rest a little easier knowing that they not only saved the day, but had each other, too. 114 Chapter 7, Wheels of Steel. Even before they'd fallen in love with each other, Deku and Todoroki knew that there was no such thing as an ordinary day in their lives, and today was another reminder of that. Recently, a mysterious individual known only as the motorway murderer had been running down random young women in his car, a tuxedo black 1968 Chevy Impala SS with chrome exhaust pipes on the sides. He offered to turn himself in to the police, but on one condition: somebody had to beat him in a drag race. No one dared to challenge him, that is, until Todoroki took him up on it. Truth be told, she had quite a bit of anxiety about doing so, but Deku had faith in her and promised to love her no matter what. So here she was at New England Dragway in Epping, New Hampshire, driving her Oldsmobile 98 Regency. Despite her anxiety, she was reasonably convinced of her success, for she'd installed a supercharger on her car's 455 Rocket V8. Thus, here they were on the starting line, facing the motorway murderer, whose identity was obscured by a black full-face racing helmet. Todoroki got some chills down her spine as she turned and saw the madman looking at her. Noticing this, Deku put a hand on her shoulder. "You've got this, Shoko." Todoroki looked over at Deku's smiling face and nodded. After a brief burnout between both cars, they pre-staged before staging. Within half a second, the Christmas tree went green for both lanes, and the race was on. Despite Todoroki putting her foot to the floor, it looked as though the Impala might have the advantage at first. However, Todoroki's raw determination meant that she kept the pedal firmly to the floor, and about halfway down that quarter mile, the Oldsmobile overtook the Impala, and soon enough, Todoroki and Deku had proven victorious. The crowd went wild for them, applause tearing through the air. However, as they pulled away from the track, it became clear that the motorway murderer was unwilling to hold up his end of the bargain, for he gave Todoroki's Oldsmobile a bump on the rear end. "Deku, I don't think we're clear yet. Keep driving, I've got an idea." Todoroki kept driving, ending up on Route 101, while the motorway murderer kept following them. Once they got out onto a nice, straight stretch of freeway, Deku cranked down his window, unbuckled his seatbelt and climbed up out the window. Deku, what are you doing? Keep driving, I got an idea. Using the windowsill as a platform, Deku jumped up into the air and Detroit smash. Deku aimed a punch square at the grille of the Impala, which not only connected, but smashed the front end in and caused the car to do a backflip through the air, landing on its rear bumper before ultimately flopping down on its roof. Once the carnage was done, Deku ran over to Todoroki, who'd come to a stop a few yards away from the wrecked Impala, which was leaking gasoline out onto the freeway. Suddenly, while the motorway murderer was attempting to clamber out of the wreckage, a spark ignited the pool of gasoline. No! The motorway murderer desperately flailed about as the flames engulfed him. Oh God, it burns! It burns! Somebody help me! Help me! The motorway murderer let out a blood-curdling scream, but it was useless. The Impala exploded in a giant fireball and took him with it, while Deku and Todoroki watched. Well, we did it, said Todoroki. Deku nodded. Yeah, good driving, by the way. Thank you. You did well stopping the madman, too. Hey, this was a team effort, and I'm happy to have you on my team. Likewise. Todoroki gave Deku another hug and kiss, while the New Hampshire State Police and the Epping Fire Department responded to the Chevy conflagration. Another day, another victory for the forces of good. Chapter 8. Congratulations from a friend. Another day of classes had ended at UA, and Deku and Todoroki were walking back to the dorms, holding hands with each other. No matter how hard any of their classes got, they were happy knowing that they had the consolation of being able to join each other after classes. Even so, Deku could never quite shake the intense warmth that welled up within him whenever he was around her. Part of him didn't want to, figuring that it was normal to feel so weird around a beautiful young lady that he was so intensely attracted to. Todoroki even took notice. Deku, is everything okay? Deku averted his gaze slightly. Oh yes. Well, I still have a bit of trouble getting used to the fact that the most beautiful girl in the world was right under my nose this whole time. I realize it's not easy thinking of me as a girl, but I really appreciate the fact that you've been so kind and supportive towards me. Really, that's the only thing I ask for from a boy. Deku did his best to look Todoroki in the eyes. Really? Todoroki smiled. Of course. Why should love be complicated? If two people really like each other, shouldn't their relationship speak for itself? Deku nodded and smiled. That is a good point. Even if I do still have trouble getting used to thinking of you as a girl, I'm glad you're not very high maintenance. I wouldn't have it any other way. Deku and Todoroki held hands as they continued heading for the dorms. Hey Deku. Hey Todoroki. Deku and Todoroki paused and turned around to see who'd addressed them. It was none other than Ochako Uraraka. Deku began sweating nervously when he saw her. Oh, hey Uraraka. Deku rubbed the back of his head. Hey why you're not mad at me for going out with Todoroki, are you? Ochako smiled. Deku, I'm not mad at you at all. I'm really happy for both of you. I mean, all I want is for my friends to be happy, you know. Deku wiped off his brow and breathed a sigh of relief. Oh, thank you. I couldn't have asked for a better friend. Ochako averted her gaze slightly and twiddled her fingers. Honestly, though, I think I might actually be a lesbian. Todoroki smiled. Uraraka, whatever you are, I just want to tell you that I really appreciate how you supported me during my coming out, and I promise I'll be there for you if you need it, too. Ah, thank you so much. Without question, Todoroki pulled Uraraka into a hug. Despite being flustered by the fact that Todoroki's breasts were smooshing against her head, Uraraka nevertheless returned the hug. Also, in spite of not being 100% sure of her sexual orientation, Uraraka felt really good about hugging Todoroki, mainly because it meant so much to her that someone who'd been through so much and who had gotten quite the outpouring of support was giving it back to her tenfold. That, and she really appreciated how soft, warm and cuddly she was. In her time at UA, Uraraka had made her fair share of friends, but thus far, none of them were quite like Todoroki. Even if they hadn't interacted often, she had seen deep down inside that this girl with the bicolored hair was truly a kind, loving soul who deserved to be called a hero. Despite not interacting with Uraraka much, Todoroki had heard quite a bit about her from Deku, and based on what she'd heard, she thought of her as a positive, uplifting individual and decided that she was somebody she'd like to get to know better. However, because of her own cold, withdrawn attitude, she could never have fathomed making an attempt to get to know her better. However, when Todoroki came out as a girl to everybody, Uraraka revealed her true colors, and to Todoroki, they were the most vibrant colors that her eyes had ever had the pleasure of feasting upon. Ever since that day, Todoroki looked forward to getting to know Uraraka better, and while they hadn't always had opportunities to hang out, she was nevertheless extraordinarily grateful for moments like this one. Though the hug could have potentially lasted forever, Uraraka eventually let go of Todoroki, and Todoroki did likewise. "You're welcome, my dear Uraraka." Uraraka giggled. "By the way, I really love the way you did your hair. What made you choose that style?" "Well, there was a character in an old movie who had her hair done this way, and I thought she looked so pretty, so I chose it for myself." "Well, it's a great choice." Uraraka gave a thumbs up. "By the way, mind if I join you and Deku on your way back?" Todoroki nodded. "Go right ahead." Deku smiled. "Yeah, you're always welcome." And so, Deku, Todoroki and Uraraka headed back to the dorms, united in love, friendship and heroism. Chapter 9. It's electric. It was a frigid winter night in Siberia, and Deku and Todoroki had but one mission: rescue one of their own from a Russian military gulag. To this end, they disguised themselves as Russian soldiers, wearing Shinel longcoats over their M69 uniforms and Ushankas with the familiar red star on the front. Both of them carried Alaska 74 rifles. Thus far, they were going about the camp unnoticed. "Hey, got any idea where Kaminari is?" whispered Deku. "I have a general idea, but to get more specific information, we'll need to obtain a prisoner roster." Deku nodded. "Right. By the way, how are you not cold? Even with this coat and hat, I'm freezing." "I'm naturally resistant to extremes of hot or cold." "Well, I guess that makes sense with your quirk." As they headed for the office where the prisoner roster was supposed to be, Deku and Todoroki continued to blend in with the other guards, mostly. "Kak Dila?" asked a guard. "Nai Plako," replied Todoroki. "Of EY? Mnie Chirtovsky Kolodno." Todoroki said nothing further. Though he knew his fair share of Russian, Deku had elected to leave the talking to her. Besides, he thought she sounded really sexy when she was speaking Russian. "Tai Hirosho Provodish, Nok?" asked another guard. Todoroki nodded. "Tak mnogo kak ya mogu." "Ah, Hirosho." Thus far, Deku was relieved that their disguises were working, though he wondered how the guards didn't say anything about Todoroki's hair being visible under her ushanka. However, not everything was peaches and cream. "Izvinity, no mnye nuzno u vidyat, vashi dokumenti," said another guard. Knowing that the guard was asking for identification, Deku and Todoroki wasted no time in whipping out their papers and handing them to him. They attempted to keep their composure as best as they could while the guard checked their IDs. "Prostituti menya, rebyata." The guard handed back their IDs. "Produljat." Deku and Todoroki nodded before continuing on their way. "That was close," whispered Deku. Todoroki said nothing else. She merely nodded. Soon enough, they came upon a small office. "This must be where the roster is kept," said Todoroki. "Keep a lookout while I open the door." "Right." Deku did a brief look-see of his surroundings, and once he was sure that nobody was looking, he gave a thumbs up to Todoroki, and they entered the office. It was fairly sparse, save for some photographs and maps on the wall, plus a wooden office desk, a swivel chair and a file cabinet. "Check the desk," said Todoroki. "I'll search the file cabinet." "Got it." Deku not only pored through the papers on top of the desk, but also the various drawers, while Todoroki went to work on the file cabinet. At first, they found nothing. Nevertheless, Deku was convinced that Todoroki was right, so they continued searching, but stopped when they heard the doorknob turning. While the door was opening, they attempted to compose themselves as best as they could and act normally. In stepped an officer, a lieutenant colonel or podporkovnik, judging by the 2 stripes and 2 stars on the shoulderboards of his uniform. "Pokazite mnye vashi dokumenti," said the officer. Without hesitation, Deku and Todoroki whipped out their papers and handed them to the lieutenant colonel. "Kadu vash komandir?" asked the officer. "Tovarish podporkovnik, razvi ada informatsia ni dolzna byt, v nashik dokumayantok?" asked Todoroki. The officer glared at Todoroki. "Kadu vash komandir?" Todoroki began sweating nervously. Kak vas zovit," said the lieutenant colonel. Todoroki's face was red. Kak vas zovit." Knowing that they were likely screwed if they continued to let the lieutenant colonel live, Deku whipped out his Alaska 74. "Stop." Before the officer could draw his Makarov, Deku shot him in the head. Todoroki gasped. "Deku, I'm glad you saved my life, but somebody could have heard that." "Then that's a risk I'm willing to take. Help me drag his body behind the desk." "Right." Deku and Todoroki dragged the officer's body behind the desk and continued their search. Soon enough. "Deku, I think I found something." Todoroki held up a clipboard, which her and Deku did a quick look over of. They found just what they were looking for: information on where Denki Kaminari was being held. However, they also heard someone approaching the office rapidly, so they put down the clipboard quickly and were about to leave when another guard burst in. Kto nibid, is vas slyszalstrel bu? Asked the guard. Todoroki shook her head. Niet, zadais vc spokojno. Hirosho, prosto de mnyeznat. Yesli uvidish, chto nibid. The guard returned to what he was doing before, while Deku and Todoroki wiped their foreheads with the backs of their hands. That was close. Todoroki put the clipboard on the desk. Follow me. Right. Deku followed Todoroki to the cell block area where Kaminari was supposed to be held. Along the way, despite the fact that Deku had shot a ranking officer, things were still going their way. Soon enough, they came upon the cell where Kaminari was. Oh no, please don't take me away, said Kaminari. I know nothing, I swear. Shish. Deku put his index finger up to his lips. Kaminari, we're here to bust you out. Todoroki used her fire and ice powers to expand and contract the lock, breaking it within short order. Come on. Todoroki quietly beckoned Kaminari over. Despite having been thoroughly bruised and bloodied, Kaminari had enough strength to get up and hurry out of his cell. He would need all the strength he could get, too, for alarms went off all throughout the gulag. Ostanovite edik devoik, onisimos vantsi. The guards discovered Deku, Todoroki and Kaminari as they were attempting to make their escape and opened fire on them. However, since these guards were all graduates of the Imperial Marksmanship Academy, their shots missed by a country mile. However, the three heroes recognized that if they hung around here long enough, then their plot armor would run out and one of them would get shot. Thus far, though, Todoroki was doing a good job of keeping the guards at bay with her quirk, and Deku was laying down some serious fire with his Alaska 74. However, Kaminari wasn't too happy about the current arrangement. Guys, can we stop playing around? There's too many of them. We'll never get out at this rate. Let me take care of this. Deku reached out for Kaminari. Kaminari, no. Thinking too quickly to stop, Kaminari let out a gigantic blast of electricity, shocking all the guards within shooting distance. While this made things significantly easier for the trio, this also had the effect of frying Kaminari's brains like KFC. I'll grab Kaminari, said Deku. We should be able to make a clean break for it. Right. Deku slung Kaminari over his shoulder, and he ran away with the help of One for All, while Todoroki followed by ice surfing. Fortunately, they made it out of the gulag without injury, and in a clearing miles away, there was an Mi-17 HIP helicopter awaiting them, which they recognized as their extraction team, so they hopped on board and flew away. Well done, Midoriya and Todoroki, said Shota Aizawa, aka Eraserhead. Once again, you two have gone above and beyond my expectations. I'm mildly impressed. Deku smiled. Well, I couldn't have done it without the best girl ever. Oh, Deku. Todoroki gave Deku another kiss. Having said that, I would have much preferred if you brought Kaminari back with his mind intact. Aizawa crossed his arms. Duh, was Kaminari's only response. Deku smiled sheepishly, while Todoroki frowned. He'll get better, right? Deku rubbed the back of his head. Aizawa simply gave a stern stare to Deku. Deep down inside, however, he valued Deku's and Todoroki's help. Chapter 10. Lonely as the night. Todoroki was driving with Deku through a torrential downpour. They'd left an anime convention in Tokyo and were heading home. The weather reports had said something about rain, but nothing about it being this heavy. Nevertheless, Todoroki was determined to get home. Granted, she was making an effort to be safe, but still, she wanted to get home badly. However, the trip home would be hampered when Todoroki heard and felt the familiar, bumpity-bumpity, sound of a tire going flat, so she pulled her Oldsmobile over, put it in park, put the hazard lights on and went to inspect the car. As it turned out, the left front tire was the one that went flat, so she popped open the Oldsmobile's trunk. Being an older, full-size car, this Oldsmobile 98 had a full-size spare tire. While this problem was taken care of, Todoroki frantically searched through the trunk and found no trace of a jack. Come on, where did I put that jack? Said Todoroki. Defeated for now, Todoroki returned to the cabin of the car. Did you call JAF? Asked Todoroki. Deku nodded. I did. However, they said it would be at least an hour before somebody gets here. In the meantime, let's just stay in the car. Good idea. Thus, Deku and Todoroki stayed in the Oldsmobile, while the rain continued to pour. Occasionally, a flash of lightning would streak across the sky, providing a source of light other than the intermittent illumination given off by the car's hazard flashers. So, Shoko, since we're out here in the middle of nowhere, unable to return home for now, how do you want to pass the time? Todoroki stroked her chin. That's a good question. Personally, I was thinking, maybe, we could play truth or dare. Deku nodded. That could work. Who should go first? I'm not sure. Why don't we play Jan Ken Pon to decide? Okay. And so, Deku and Todoroki played a round of what in the US would be called rock paper scissors. Deku chose paper, while Todoroki chose scissors. Looks like it's your turn, said Todoroki. Truth or dare? Dare. Very well. I dare you to show me your best All Might impression. Deku chuckled. Very well. He changed his face and voice to resemble that of the legendary symbol of peace. Have no fear. I am here. Todoroki giggled when she heard Deku's All Might impression. Okay, your turn, said Deku, now sporting his usual voice and face. Truth or dare? Truth. Okay, so, have you ever been jealous of any of the other girls in our class? Todoroki smiled and averted her gaze. Well, I was kinda jealous of Yaoyorozu, but other than that, not really. Truth or dare? Truth. Have you ever had a crush on any girls besides me? Well, I'm aware of the rumors regarding me and Uraraka, but the truth is, and this might surprise you, I had a really big crush on Asui. Oh? Why? Well, I really love the way she does her hair, and she has a really cute face and voice, not to mention a nice body, not that yours isn't nice, I mean. Todoroki giggled. Deku, you're such a sweetheart. Well, I tend to be sweet on people, especially people like you who showed a need for it. Come here. Todoroki leaned closer to Deku as if she were going to kiss him. However, before her lips could meet his, a pair of headlights approached the car from the other side of the road before coming to a stop, so she pulled away and looked over at the Toyota Hiachi parked on the other side of the road. Could that be the JAF guy now? Asked Todoroki. Let me see something. Deku looked at his phone. I only called them a few minutes ago. Let me take care of this. Todoroki got out of the car and waved at the mysterious shadowy figure who got out of the van. Hey, we need help, said Todoroki. One of our tires is. Todoroki cut herself off when a flash of lightning revealed the mysterious figure's skull face and the glint of an axe blade. She gasped when she saw this and turned to her Oldsmobile. Deku, help. Seeing that Todoroki was in trouble, Deku got out of the car and rushed over to her. Shoko. What's wrong? Over there. Todoroki thrust her index finger in the direction of the assailant, but. Over where? Said Deku. Did you not see that evil killer with the axe? Shoko, there's nothing there but that van. Todoroki dropped her jaw when she saw that the mysterious figure had disappeared, and yet the van was still there. Without question, they searched the van, only to find nobody in it. We should find somewhere else to wait, said Todoroki. The car's not safe. But where? Todoroki looked around, and for a moment, she saw a mailbox illuminated by her Oldsmobile's hazard flashers. Looking further down the driveway, she saw a large house off in the distance as another flash of lightning streaked across the sky. That house over there. Todoroki pointed in the direction of the house. Deku looked over to where the house was. Shoko, that seems like a bad idea to me. The writer's probably expecting us to go in. What if there are evil monsters in there? What choice do we have? If we stay with the car, we're probably doomed if a wanton motorist comes for us. Deku sighed. All right, we'll go in the house, but I'm doing so under severe protest. Your protest is noted and understood. Continuing to struggle against the wind and rain, Deku and Todoroki headed for the house. Upon getting closer, they noticed that it was in a bit of disrepair. When they stepped on the porch, Deku knocked on the door. He got no response at first, so he knocked again, this time a bit more loudly. Hello, said Deku. Is there anyone in there? Deku knocked a bit more loudly than the last time, but he still got no response. Hey, let us in. We need some shelter from the rain. Deku and Todoroki still got no response, so Deku banged on the door quite hard. Still, there was no response, so with no other options, he decided to try opening the door and going in himself. Fortunately, or so it seemed, the door was unlocked, so they took their footwear off and went inside. Inside, it was pitch black, so Deku and Todoroki used the flashlights on their phones to search around in the darkness. Judging by what they could see, this house had fallen into disuse, with old, creaky floorboards, cobwebs covering various objects, old furniture that needed refinishing, even a dead wasp's nest on the ceiling. Guess nobody's home, said Deku. Let me turn on the lights. Since the house was retrofitted with electric lighting, Todoroki looked around for the nearest light switch and found one. Unfortunately, turning it on did nothing, and an attempt to turn on a nearby lamp on a small table did nothing, either. Shoko. Why is your hand on my shoulder? I'm not touching your shoulder. Deku looked over at Todoroki and noticed that she was opposite the side of his body where he was being touched. Realizing that there was quite possibly a ghost in the house, he freaked out and ran away waving his arms around. Deku, wait. Todoroki went after Deku, trying to allay his fears when all of a sudden, in one hallway, a giant skull leapt out at her, laughing evilly. She screamed as she recoiled from the terror, falling on her ass. She was unhurt otherwise, and she got back up and quickly looked around for Deku. 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 Seeing no trace of Deku, Todoroki decided to proceed in the general direction of where she last saw him, hoping to find him. As for Deku, once he was sure he'd gotten away from whatever it was that had laid its hand on his shoulder, he closed a door behind him and laid his back against it, sweating, huffing and puffing. Throughout his lifetime, he'd heard his fair share of tales about haunted houses, but up until now, he thought they were merely that, tales. Having gotten a taste of what this abode had to offer, though, he was doubting himself. Nevertheless, he was determined to find his dear Todoroki. There has to be a way back to Shoko, said Deku to himself. I think I heard her chasing after me after I got spooked, but I must have lost her. I could go back through that door and try to find her again, but what if I run into more spooky creatures again, and worse, what if they took her away? There has to be another way out of this room, but if there is no other way, I'll have to make my own way because mutter 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 mutter. Come on in here, said a demonic voice. Deku screamed as he saw another door open into a hazy, bright red room. Worse, the opening of the door caused a swarm of bats to fly into the room where he was, and he screamed and swatted about as he attempted to bat away the bats. Not wanting to become bat food, he scurried to the new door, seeing no other way out. He entered another hallway, and he tried his best to make his way back to Todoroki, coming into another room that had a dead end. As for Todoroki, she was proceeding through the hallway where Deku was last seen, though she hadn't a clue as to where he was at the moment, and though the house was giving her more creeps than Radiohead, she refused to give up. She opened a nearby door, which led into a bedroom. Like the rest of the house, it was similarly decrepit. The one item of interest that she caught was the fact that the queen-size bed was neatly made. Deku? No response. Deku, it's Shoko, are you in here? Still no response. Figuring that Deku would have responded affirmatively if he'd heard her, she left that room and proceeded onwards, using her fire not only as a source of light, but also readying herself in case of attack. Soon enough, she got to another room and got spooked when a bunch of bats flew out upon opening the door. Her flame burned brighter and hotter, and she very nearly burned the entire house down. Okay, get a hold of yourself, Shoko. Todoroki took a couple of deep breaths. Deku couldn't have gone far. Besides, there are only so many rooms in this house. Aside from the bats, the room that Todoroki entered was pretty much empty. The hazy red glow that emanated from the other hallway was still present, so she followed it, hoping to find him before it was too late. Meanwhile, Deku took a look at his surroundings. Like the rest of the house, there were a bunch of old knick-knacks strewn about that were covered in cobwebs, but one thing of note was a large wine rack on one wall with more than a few bottles of wine. Hello, visitor, said a deep, mysterious male voice, quite possibly the same one from before. Deku raised his fists. Who are you? Show yourself, wherever you are. I am the one who has inhabited this house since years after my passing. Though my body is becoming part of the ecosystem, my soul remains here. If you are the one who lives here, then why do you haunt me and my girlfriend? Because you two are intruding on my peace and quiet. Deku uncurled one of his fists and extended his hand, palm facing forwards. Look, we don't want any trouble. If it means that much to you, then we'll leave you be. I'm afraid I cannot allow that. You two must become my prisoners forever. Suddenly, a couple of the wine bottles removed themselves from the rack and hurled themselves at Deku, who dodged them as best as he could. Recognizing them as a threat, he resorted to another tactic. Delaware Smash. All of the wine bottles exploded, showering the immediate vicinity with small shards of glass and random vintages. Having eliminated that threat, Deku attempted to exit the room, but found that the door was locked. Did you really think you could exit this room that easily? Said the owner's spirit. You are doomed to remain here. Despite what the owner said, Deku was intently determined to break out of this room, and no amount of locked doors would keep him from that goal. Deku, are you in there? Deku paused temporarily when he heard Shoko's voice from the other side of the door. Yeah, I'm in here, said Deku. Can you get me out? Let me try. Todoroki attempted to pry the door open. It stuck. Stand back, I've got an idea. Todoroki obeyed Deku's command. Okay. Ignoring the furniture that was being hurled at him, Deku readied his fist. Detroit smash. Fortunately, this had enough force to break the door open, and Deku was free. Come on. Let's get out of here, said Deku. But what about the rain? We don't even know if the JAF guy is here yet. Never mind that. Anything is better than staying in this haunted house. Hold my hand. And so, Deku led Todoroki back to the beginning of the house. Along the way, more apparitions jumped out at them and attempted to scare them, but with each other's love bolstering their spirits, they decided to tough it out and run right through as if nothing mattered. Both of them were pouring buckets of sweat and breathing heavily, but all they cared about was getting out alive. Soon enough, they made it to the front door, but unfortunately, no matter how hard they tried, this door was also sealed shut. Alright, let me try this again. Deku readied himself for another Detroit smash. Just then, him and Todoroki heard knocking on the door. Hello, is anyone in here? Asked a male voice from outside. Help us! Screamed Todoroki. We're trapped, and there are evil monsters in here. The door slid open, and there stood a man dressed in the typical uniform of the Japan Automobile Federation. A white helmet, an orange, blue jacket, an orange vest with reflective stripes, orange pants and black leather boots. Are you two okay? Asked the JAF guy. What were you two doing in this house? My girlfriend suffered a flat tire, and we needed a place to stay in the rain, replied Deku. Unfortunately, evil monsters and ghosts tried to attack us. The JAF guy nodded. Yes, there have been many legends and superstitions about this old house. You two are lucky to be alive. Anyways, I presume your girlfriend is the owner of that red Oldsmobile? Todoroki nodded. I am. Well, then let's get that tire changed. Deku and Todoroki looked at each other briefly before gathering up their footwear and following the JAF guy back to Todoroki's Oldsmobile. Say, did you notice a van parked on the other side of the road? Asked Deku. No, the only other car I saw parked near this house was your girlfriend's Oldsmobile, replied the JAF guy. Chills ran up and down Deku's and Todoroki's spines as they realized that the hauntings might not be over yet. Chapter 11. American Curiosity. It was one of the hottest days of the year in Musutafu, with temperatures hitting at least 95 degrees Fahrenheit, or 35 degrees Celsius as the Japanese would say, and Deku and Todoroki were out and about, trying their best not to melt from the heat. Ordinarily, they would have stayed home and blasted their air conditioners, but Uraraka wanted to have a little study session with them, so they agreed to help her out. Even dressed appropriately for the weather, Deku in an emerald green t-shirt and blue shorts, and Todoroki in a red tank top and white shorts with red stripes, they still felt as they were going to keel over from heat exhaustion. Not even Todoroki's resistance to extremes of hot or cold was helping her out, and using the cold part of her quirk would only cause her to freeze up and have to defrost with the hot part of her quirk. We'd better find something or someplace to cool off, said Todoroki. I can't take this heat much longer. Neither can I, but we shouldn't be too far from our homes, said Deku. Problem is, it feels like they're so far away. Why don't we grab a cold beverage or something? Konnichiwa, Musutafu Shimin, Kyo wa Genkidesu ka. Deku and Todoroki turned to see who'd addressed them. A young brunette of somewhat shapely build with her hair in a bun. She wore a dark green t-shirt with a lemon-shaped logo and Daisy Duke shorts. She was stationed at a small food cart with a green and yellow umbrella, and the cart itself had an enlarged version of the lemon logo, with the name, Dell's, plus the slogan, Stop at the sign of the lemon. Hi there. Deku smiled and waved at the woman. We speak English. Oh, cool. The woman smiled awkwardly and rubbed the back of her head. My name is Jen, and I'm a representative of Dell's Lemonade. Dell's Lemonade? Todoroki tilted her head. What's that? We're a company from the U.S. state of Rhode Island that specializes in frozen lemonade, replied Jen. Deku nodded. Interesting. How did this company get started? Our story goes back to 1840, when Franco de Lucia's father carried snow to caves near Naples, Italy and insulated it with straw. When summer came around, he took the snow and mixed it with lemon juice and sugar to produce frozen lemonade and sold it at the local market. After the family came to America, Franco's son Angelo began work on a machine to produce the frozen lemonade as well as a method of making it consistently awesome. It was because of this machine that the first Dell's Lemonade stand opened in the town of Cranston in 1948, and our company has grown since then. We're currently looking to expand our operation over here to Japan, and we figured that Musutafu would be one of the prime spots to put down roots. Todoroki smiled. It is a nice city. May we have some? Certainly, said Jen. We're giving out free samples. Practically dying from the heat, the choice was obvious to Deku and Todoroki. "I'll have some," said Deku. "Me too," said Todoroki. Thus, Deku and Todoroki each took a small green and yellow paper cup of Deku's and proceeded to annihilate their thirsts. They each let out a hearty as the freezing cold of the ice soothed their souls and the sweet lemon flavor excited their senses. Considering how exhausted the heat and humidity had made them, they pretty much inhaled their Deku's. "That was great," said Deku. "May we have some more?" "Sure. The prices are marked over here." Jen pointed out a little sign indicating sizes and prices. Without question, Deku and Todoroki each whipped out some cash for a medium cup of Deku's. "Thank you for your business," said Jen. "You're welcome. Have a nice day." Todoroki smiled and waved at Jen. "You too." Deku and Todoroki headed home while partaking in another round of Deku's. "Shoko, I'm glad we found out about Deku's, but I have one question." Todoroki lowered her cup. "Yes." Deku winced. "How do you drink this stuff without getting brain freeze?" "I'm immune to brain freeze. Besides, I read there's a trick to not getting brain freeze." "What?" "Try to drink it without letting it touch the roof of your mouth." Deku did his best to smile. "Right, I'll try to remember that. Thanks." Todoroki smiled, too. "You're welcome." And thus, Deku and Todoroki headed home, not only satisfied with their current rounds of Deku's, but eagerly anticipating more. Chapter 12. Red and white Sonia. The hot sun beat down on the landscape, and Deku had been through the desert on a horse with no name, and it felt good to be out of the rain. However, in the desert, he could remember his name, 'cause there wasn't. The directors of the firm hired to continue the chapter after the other people had been sacked. Wish it to be known that they have just been sacked. The chapter has been completed in an entirely different style at great expense and at the last minute. A dense fog shrouded the landscape of the kingdom of Sirlanya, and a quick galloping noise could be heard off in the distance. A faint outline emerged from the fog, and as it came into focus, it turned out to be Deku, clad in knight's armor, only he was without a horse. Rather, the galloping sound came from his faithful manservant Bob, a brown-haired man of average height and build with a short beard, who was merely banging two coconuts together to make a galloping sound. Nevertheless, they were proceeding at quite a brisk pace. "Whoa there!" Deku held up his right fist and stopped, and Bob came to a stop as well. In the distance, Deku could see a light of some sort. He wasn't too sure, but he figured it was probably a campfire. However, he could only faintly make out one other shape at best. He wanted to be sure that whatever the light source was, it wouldn't lead him to danger. However, when a few minutes passed and nothing happened, Deku motioned forward to Bob, and they proceeded onwards towards the light. As the light grew brighter, it became apparent that it was a campfire. Furthermore, there were 3 knights seated around it. Almost immediately, they took notice of Deku and Bob. "Who goes there?" said the first knight, a tall man with brown hair and a goatee. "My name is Izuku Midoriya. Though I am but the son of a poor cobbler, I have ridden the length and breadth of this great kingdom, searching for valiant knights who will join me in my great quest. Will you join me?" "What?" said the second knight, a man with blonde hair and a mustache, ridden on a horse. Deku nodded. "Why, yes. You're using coconuts," said the third knight, a man with black hair and a short beard. Deku tilted his head slightly. "What?" The third knight gestured at Deku with his hand. "You've got 2 empty halves of coconut and you're banging them together." "So? We have ridden even as the snows of winter blanketed this land, over the northern mountains, through." "Where'd you get the coconuts?" "We bought them." "Bought them?" said the second knight. "North of the northern mountains. The coconut's tropical. If one were to attempt to transport it this far north, it would be bloody well rotten by then." "But it's the truth." Deku gestured at the second knight with both of his hands. "A fruit salesman was selling them at the market, and—" "Oh, bug off, you silly sod," said the first knight. "We've no time for your rubbish." The second knight gestured to an indeterminate point with his index finger. "Take your silly coconuts and bother some other poor bugger." Deku put his fists on his hips. "If you shall not join me, then I'll find others to assist me in my quest." "Ha! I should love to see you try," said the third knight. Undeterred by the knight's rejection, Deku and Bob rode on. The farther they went, the less faith Deku had in his chances of finding somebody to assist him on his quest. Sure, he didn't seem all that bothered by the 3 knights turning him down, but given how far he'd traveled without anybody accepting his offer to join him, he had to wonder if he was doing this for naught. Despite his doubt, he also felt that he had to soldier on no matter what. Then, while lamenting his lack of companions on his quest, a loud sound interrupted his thought process. He looked over in the direction where the sound came from, and he noticed a large blast of ice emerging from somewhere. Upon closer inspection, he noticed two knights dueling it out in a clearing, one clad in light blue armor, and the other wearing black armor. The light blue knight was the one responsible for the ice blasts, while the black knight slashed through it with his sword and aggressively attempted to close in on his opponent. Deku wasn't too sure, but his instincts told him that the black knight was not to be trusted, so he drew his trusty sword, charged at the black knight, and Newcastle Smash. With one mighty slash, Deku chopped off the black knight's arm, causing the knight to recoil for a bit and turn his attention to Deku. "Interloper!" exclaimed the black knight. "How dare you interfere with our duel?" "Black Knight, I know you're not a trustworthy person." Deku pointed his sword at him. "Leave this knight be and stand aside." "Ha! 'Tis but a scratch. A scratch? Your arm's off." "No it isn't." "Well, what's that, then?" Deku gestured towards the chopped-off arm. "I've had worse." "You liar. Come on, you pansy." Despite being partially dismembered, the Black Knight refused to give up and instead valiantly charged at Deku, putting up a surprisingly good fight. The light blue knight observed curiously. Soon enough. Yorkshire Smash. With one flick, Deku knocked the Black Knight's sword out of his hand and chopped his other arm off. "Victory is mine." Deku raised his sword triumphantly, before turning to talk to the light blue knight. "Excuse me, but I have traveled a great." However, Deku was disrupted by a blow to his backside. As it turned out, the Black Knight, still having not learned his lesson, was kicking Deku, who growled out of annoyance. "Come on, then," said the Black Knight. "What?" said Deku. "Have at you." The Black Knight continued to kick Deku. "You are indeed brave, Black Knight, but this fight is mine." "Oh, had enough, eh?" Deku threw his arms out at the Black Knight. "Look, you stupid bastard, you have no arms left." "Yes I have." "No you don't, it's just a flesh wound." Deku shook his head and turned around, while the Black Knight continued to kick him. "Stop that!" yelled Deku. "Chicken," said the Black Knight, "chicken." "Chicken. I'll give you, chicken." Deku chopped the Black Knight's left leg off. "Right, I'll do you for that," said the Black Knight. "You'll what?" "Come here." The Black Knight hopped around. "What are you gonna do, bleed on me? I'm invincible." "You're a loony." The Black Knight always triumphs. "Have at you." "Come on, then." Deku shook his head and chopped off the Black Knight's remaining leg. "Alright, we'll call it a draw," said the Black Knight. Deku motioned to Bob. "Come, Bob." He turned to the other knight. Will you join us on our quest?" The other knight nodded and then removed his helmet, revealing that he was in fact a she, a woman with white and red hair in a flipped bob, snow white on the right, and wine red on the left, along with a dark red scar over her left eye, which was blue. Deku gasped when this became apparent to him. You're a woman. I'm surprised this wasn't obvious to you, my good savior. Nevertheless, I will join you on your quest, provided you join me on mine, that is." Deku scratched his head. "That sounds intriguing, but what is your quest?" "I shall explain on the way." Deku nodded. "Right, let's go." Deku, the other knight and Bob went on their way. Oh, I see," said the Black Knight. "Running away, eh? You yellow bastards. Come back here and take what's coming to you. I'll bite your legs off." Deku, Bob and the other knight headed deeper into Gleifnir Forest, where Deku asked his new companion about her quest. "Well? Allow me to introduce myself. I am Princess Shoko of the Todoroki clan. In recent times, an evil sorcerer calling himself All for One has threatened to destroy my kingdom unless my father abdicates from the throne, so I have taken it upon myself to destroy All for One." All for One. Deku looked off into the distance as he touched his cheek with his index finger. That name sounds familiar. He lowered his index finger. "Anyways, it's nice to meet you, Todoroki. I am Izuku Midoriya, the son of a poor cobbler. A fearsome monster known as Gigantomachia has massacred several villages in my kingdom, and I'm going to stop him once and for all. Bob here is my faithful servant who has chosen to accompany me." Todoroki nodded. "I see, it's nice to meet you too, Midoriya." She turned to Bob. "Nice to meet you too, Bob." Bob nodded. "You know, Todoroki, I had a feeling you were a princess," said Deku. Todoroki scratched her head. "How did you figure that out? You don't have shit all over you." Todoroki simply shot Deku a blank stare. Deku, Todoroki and Bob continued onwards in their valiant quest to defeat Gigantomachia and All for One. While Deku wasn't 100% sure what lay ahead of them, he was feeling better knowing that he had Todoroki by his side. Her ice quirk seemed like a hell of a quirk to him, and coupled with his own, They were sure to be unbeatable. Hell, he hoped they were unbeatable. So Todoroki, that's a most interesting quirk you have. Thank you, Midoriya. I can also shoot fire from my left side, but I much prefer my right side. Any particular reason? I'd prefer not to discuss it now. Tell me about your quirk instead. Well, mine was sort of a gift, actually. When I first got it, I had trouble controlling it, which led to many broken bones. However, a friend of my friend taught me how to better control it, so now I rarely, if ever, get injured from using it. How did you manage to injure yourself using your quirk? Deku shrugged. I guess my body couldn't handle that kind of power. I've been getting better at controlling how much of it I use, though, and I can concentrate it in certain parts of my body, like my fingers. Todoroki nodded. Interesting. Perhaps I was right in accepting your offer. Deku smiled. With a quirk like yours, I think you were. You seem so sure of me, Midoriya. How do? Todoroki's thoughts were interrupted when she caught something out of the corner of her eye. In a clearing was a chicken. What's wrong, Todoroki? Asked Deku. Midoriya, that's the vicious chicken of Brinfenor. Deku gave a blank stare to the chicken, and then laughed. Todoroki, I think you're pulling my leg. Todoroki put a hand on Deku's shoulder and gently shook it. This is no time to accuse me of pulling one of your limbs. The vicious chicken of Brinfenor is a brutal beast. Scores of people have attempted to best it in combat, and none have survived. Deku raised his sword. Then I'm gonna be the first, Newcastle Smash. Deku valiantly lunged at the vicious chicken of Brinfenor, and it charged at him, too. Deku's sword struck the bird square on, and when he landed, the chicken was completely intact. What? Stand aside, Midoriya, I've got this one. Todoroki shot a blast of ice at the chicken, and she succeeded in freezing it. However, a few seconds later, the ice began to crack, and shortly thereafter, the chicken escaped with only minor, if any, scratches. No being should have escaped my ice that easily, said Todoroki. Let's try this again. Todoroki shot another round of ice, while Deku and Bob attempted to distract the chicken. Again, she froze the chicken, but again, it broke free. Let's try this again. No being can withstand cold forever. Once again, Todoroki attempted to freeze the chicken, but no matter how hard she tried, the bird always managed to break the ice. Eventually, ice started forming over her body, and her movements were slowing down drastically. Todoroki, use your fire against it, said Deku. It'll just keep breaking through your ice. No, I'll never submit to my father. You're hurting. You'll have to warm up sooner or later. Then let me hurt. I'd rather freeze to death than give my father the satisfaction of seeing me use his fire. Deku clenched his fists. Todoroki, listen to me. Just because you inherited half of your quirk from your father doesn't mean you should be ashamed of it. A quirk is what you make of it no matter what your family history was like. It's yours. Your quirk, not his. Todoroki still didn't want to use her fire, but hearing Deku's words proved to be a veritable wake-up call for her. Feeling that she could use her own fire without having to submit to her father, she slowly raised her right hand as the chicken was charging at her. Thank you, Midoriya. Todoroki shot a mighty blast of flame at the chicken. That did it. Not only was the chicken unable to dodge it, but it was fried through and through. Furthermore, Todoroki had managed to defrost herself. After the battle, Deku and Todoroki made a little campfire and had some fried chicken for supper, as did Bob. Midoriya, thank you again for your uplifting words. For so long, I had shunned my fire half because of my father's abusive upbringing of me. But because of you, I feel as though I can look to the future with hope. Deku swallowed the piece of chicken thigh he was eating. You're welcome. You seem like you could use a friend, so I'm only too happy to help. Todoroki cast the drumstick bone she'd eaten aside. About that. Yes. Midoriya, I haven't known you for that long, but you seem like a very noble soul who would do anything for the people he loves, and I'm happy to have met you. Deku smiled. Well, I'm happy to have met you too. Todoroki stared deeply into Deku's green eyes. Then, she smiled, and after tenderly wrapping her arms around him, she kissed him. Deku's eyes flew wide open when her lips met his. Having never been in a romantic relationship with anybody, never mind a princess, he lost all control of his senses. Nevertheless, feeling a mutual attraction with her, he wrapped his arms around her as well. He may not have known her for that long, but already, he felt such a deep, intense connection with her, and he wanted more of what she was giving him. Even if their quest wasn't finished yet, he was feeling that much more optimistic about his chances of success. Todoroki was feeling at least equally optimistic. Like Deku, she too hadn't had any luck in the romance department, and to find someone who cared about her meant so much to her. It didn't even matter to her that he was a mere commoner. She just found him to be so cute and noble that she felt that he deserved her heart. For so long, having labored under the shadow of her domineering father, she was now finally feeling free, and deep within her heart for what seemed like the first time in her life, she was also feeling hope. Todoroki couldn't possibly abandon Deku at this point in her quest. She continued kissing him for quite some time, and when she finally broke away, she continued to make eye contact with him. "I love you, Izuku Midoriya." Deku smiled. "I love you too, Shoko Todoroki. Also, you can call me Deku." Todoroki giggled. "What a cute nickname. Where did you get it?" "Well, a friend of mine used it as a shortened form of defenseless Izuku. But another friend really liked it and encouraged me to keep using it, so it stuck." Todoroki nodded. "Interesting. Since you allowed me to call you Deku, I shall allow you to call me Shoko." "Then it's settled. Now let's finish up the rest of this chicken." "Just one question." "Yes? Your companion Bob. Why does he not speak?" Deku shrugged. "I'm not sure." After finishing what remained of the fried chicken, Deku, Todoroki and Bob continued on their quest. The next couple of hours proved to be uneventful for them. Soon enough, they came upon a lake in a clearing. By now, the sun was starting to sink below the horizon. "Deku, I don't know about you, but I feel that we should camp here for the night." Deku yawned. "Yeah, I'm getting pretty tired, too." Thus, Deku and Todoroki pitched a simple tent near the shore of the lake. "If you'll excuse me, I'm going to bathe in the lake," said Todoroki. "So am I. Why you don't mind, do you?" "Oh not at all." Thus, Deku and Todoroki stripped, trying their best not to look at each other. Then, they proceeded to bathe in the lake, as did Bob. After such a long journey, feeling the cool lake water against his skin felt so refreshing to Deku. Despite his best efforts, Deku ended up peeking at Todoroki anyways, and in doing so, he noticed she was very well endowed. He knew she was beautiful, but knowing this about her, he couldn't ever imagine spending his life with any other woman. That aside, once he felt suitably cleansed, Deku exited the water, dried off with a simple cloth he'd brought with him and was about to enter the tent when "Going to sleep, Deku?" Deku looked over and saw Todoroki nearby, also having dried off. "Oh why yes, then please allow me to snuggle with you." Deku dropped his jaw as all the redness went to his face. Are you sure? Would I have asked you if I wasn't? Deku, you seem very troubled by my offer. Is everything okay?" It's just, no woman's offered to do that with me before." Todoroki put a hand on Deku's shoulder. "Deku, there's no need to be so flustered about it. Do we not love and trust each other?" Deku stared into Todoroki's eyes. As embarrassed as he was by the fact that a hot naked woman was offering to snuggle with him, she did have a very good point, so he came to his conclusion. Alright, I'll snuggle with you." Todoroki smiled. "Thank you." Deku and Todoroki entered the tent and snuggled with each other under the blanket. For the first time, he discovered just how soft, warm and cuddly she was without her armor. "Hey Shoko, thanks again for joining me on my quest. This has been the happiest day of my life so far." "Speak for yourself. For so long, my life had been occluded by darkness, but for you to come along and say what you said, I don't know how I could possibly repay you." Deku giggled. "Shoko, kissing me was payment enough." Todoroki giggled, too. "Good night, Deku. Good night, Shoko." And so, Deku and Todoroki embraced each other as they went to sleep. Even if the quest had yet to conclude, Deku was feeling optimistic about it. Chapter 13. Red and White Sonia, Part 2. Deku awoke to feel a strange sensation on his neck. Soon, it became obvious to him that Todoroki was nibbling and sucking on his neck. He gasped when this became apparent to him. "Todoroki." Deku gently pushed at Todoroki until she stopped nibbling his neck. "What?" said Todoroki. Deku frowned. You could have just woken me up with a kiss." Todoroki smiled. "True, but I really enjoy nibbling and sucking people's necks, especially handsome boys." Deku gave a disbelieving stare to Todoroki, whose smile didn't waver for 1 second. Then, Deku broke out into a smile of his own. "Hey Shoko, yes? Enjoy this." Deku grabbed Todoroki's well-endowed chest, causing her to let out a loud gasp. "How dare you grab those, you impudent commoner." Deku smiled. "Hey, you get what you give. Oh really, I'll give you something back." Todoroki wrapped her arms around Deku and kissed him, and he returned her gesture. Soon enough, they broke away. "You may be an impudent commoner, but you're still the noblest, most handsome boy I've ever met," said Todoroki. "And you're the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever met. Deku, you're so sweet. I could say the same of you." Let's just get breakfast, shall we? After having breakfast, Deku, Todoroki and Bob packed up their tents and blankets before moving on. Thus far, things were going smoothly. "Ah, what a beautiful day," said Deku. "I feel like anything is possible today." "Wow, you're especially cheery today, care to explain?" "What is there to explain? I'm that much closer to finishing my quest, and best of all, I have the most beautiful woman in the world accompanying me." Todoroki giggled. "Well, I suppose I'll give you that. Ni." Deku and Todoroki froze when they heard that simple monosyllabic exclamation. Standing in their path was a group of knights. "Who are you?" said Deku. "We are the knights who say, Ni," said the head knight, a tall man with a long brown beard. Todoroki gasped. "No, not the knights who say, Ni." "The same." Deku looked over at Todoroki. Why are we so concerned about these guys?" "We are the keepers of the sacred words, Ni, Pung, and Ne Wam," said the head knight. "Deku, those who hear those words seldom live to tell the tale," said Todoroki. Deku drew his sword. "Well, we might just be the first." "The knights who say, Ni, demand a sacrifice," said the head knight. "Knights who say, Ni, we are but simple travelers who only wish to reach a castle that lies beyond these woods," said Deku. "If you shall not allow us to reach this castle, then we shall have no choice but to fight you. Ni." The rest of the knights continued to pummel Deku and Todoroki with shouts of, Ni. While Deku seemed to be unfazed, it was clear that Todoroki was having trouble coping with the onslaught, as evidenced by her clutching her ears. Bob was also feeling the pain of having to hear, Ni, over and over. "Deku, make them stop. We shall say, Ni, again if you do not appease us," said the head knight. "Well, tell us what you want and I won't kill you all," said Deku. "We want a strawberry." A dramatic orchestral sting sounded when the head knight made his demand. "A shrubbery?" said Deku. "No, a strawberry." The same dramatic orchestral sting sounded again. "Please, don't say, Ni, again," said Todoroki, "we'll get you a strawberry. You must return here with a strawberry, or else you shall never pass through this forest alive," said the head knight. "Knights who say, Ni, though I dislike you, I find you to be just and fair, and we will get you a strawberry," said Deku. "One that is sweet and juicy, of course, and not too expensive." "Yes. Now, go." Deku, Todoroki and Bob branched off onto a different path, hoping to find a strawberry. They found none growing in the wilderness of Gleifnir Forest, but they soon came upon a small village in a clearing. After giving it some thought, they approached an old woman. "Excuse us, ma'am, but do you know of any place in this town where we could buy strawberries?" asked Deku. "No, we have no strawberries," said the old woman. "Ni," said Deku. The old woman cringed upon hearing this, but nevertheless stood her ground. "Go away. We haven't any strawberries here. If you don't tell us where we can buy strawberries here, then my girlfriend and I will continue to say, Ni," said Deku. The old woman cringed again, but continued to stand against Deku, Todoroki and Bob. "Do your worst," said the old woman. "Very well, then," said Deku, "Ni." "No, never. No strawberries. Ni." The old woman let out a wet, hacking cough upon hearing the repeated utterings of, Ni. "Ni," said Deku. "Ni, no," said Todoroki, "no. No, 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 Todoroki, it's, Ni, no, no. I said it's, Ni." "Oh, sorry. Ni. Ni." The old woman covered her ears in an attempt to shield herself from the barrage of Ni's. However, no matter how hard she tried, she found herself unable to resist such verbal injury, and it seemed that she too would fall victim to this infamous word. "Stop, you too," said a mysterious male voice. "Stop, I say." Deku and Todoroki stopped saying, Ni, and turned to see who'd addressed them. A man dressed as a commoner wearing a strawberry-shaped hat. "Are you two saying, Ni, to that old woman?" said the man. "Why yes," said Deku. "What is wrong with you two? Are you mad? Have you no sense of decency? At long last, have you left no sense of decency? Why, such a sad day it is when such young ruffians as yourselves can be so free and reckless in saying, Ni, to old ladies. As a seller of fruit, I must protest your disorderly behavior." Deku raised an eyebrow. "Wait, did you say, fruit?" "Why yes, I deal in fruit, mainly strawberries. My name is Roger." "Well, if it's not too much trouble, we'd like to buy some strawberries from you." "Ni," said Todoroki. "Todoroki, you can stop saying, Ni, now," said Deku. "Oh, sorry." Having bought a carton of strawberries, Deku, Todoroki and Bob returned to the knights who say, Ni. "Oh knights who say, Ni, we have brought you a strawberry," said Deku. Several of them, said Todoroki. May we pass through now? The head knight took a bite of one of the strawberries and nodded. This is a good strawberry, perhaps the sweetest and juiciest I have yet tasted. However, there is one small problem. What is that? Asked Deku. We are no longer the knights who say, ni. Ha! We are now the knights who say, tiki tiki tembo no sa rembo chari bari ruchi pip peri pembo. Also, we must give you a test. What is this test? Knights who, until recently, said, ni. Firstly, you must get us more strawberries. The dramatic orchestral sting sounded again. But we already got you strawberries, said Deku. Then, when you have gotten us the strawberries, you must get us even more strawberries, said the head knight. Yet again, the dramatic orchestral sting cut through the air. Then, when you have gotten us those strawberries, you must cut down the mightiest tree in this forest, with a herring. For the fifth time, the dramatic orchestral sting came up. Dissatisfied with the knights who say, tiki tiki tembo no sa rembo chari bari ruchi pip peri pembo, Todoroki clenched her fists. A herring, said Todoroki. I'll show you what you can do with your herring. Todoroki stomped her way over to the head knight. The other knights, genuinely afraid of what might happen to them, ran away, leaving the head knight to stand, frozen in fear by the sight of the approaching Todoroki as she snatched the herring from him and forced him to bend over. No! What are you doing? You must use that herring to cut down the tree. Please, let me be. I'll do anything you want. The head knight let out a high-pitched shriek as Todoroki shoved the herring somewhere where no herring should logically go. Unable to comprehend the pain, he keeled over on the ground. Come on, Deku, let's proceed forth. Todoroki, did you really have to do that? When a woman is fed up with someone or something, then yes, she is obliged to do as she pleases. Deku smiled nervously. Heh, okay. Let's just keep going, shall we? Having passed the knights who, until recently, said, ni, Deku, Todoroki and Bob continued their trek through the forest. Aside from the sounds of various birds and insects, there was nothing to disturb their trek onwards. Deku, I've been meaning to ask you. What is it, Shoko? This Gigantomachia, you have no idea where he resides, do you? Exactly where he lives, I couldn't tell you. However, I have a feeling that this, all for one, you mentioned has something to do with him. You really think so? Well, there's only one way to find out. Eventually, the forest ended, and Deku, Todoroki and Bob came to some grasslands. Not too far off from the grasslands, there was a lake. Proceeding further, not only did they notice a small boat on the shore and a man standing beside it, but across the way, there was a castle. That castle, said Todoroki. No, it can't be, it's none other than Castle Slayer. Deku and Bob gave Todoroki quizzical looks. Castle Slayer, said Deku. This is the very castle where All for One is said to reside. Todoroki briefly glanced at the castle before turning back to Deku. Nobody who has set foot near that castle has survived. Rumor has it that even to see the castle is death. Deku patted the hilt of his sword. Then let us be the first to do the impossible. Deku, Todoroki and Bob galloped onwards to the man with the boat, an old man with scraggly graying hair and an equally scraggly beard. Stop, said the man. Who would cross the lake of death must answer me these questions three, ere the other side he see. Ask away, my good sir, said Deku. What is your name? Izuku Midoriya. What is your quest? To defeat Gigantomachia. What is the time it takes for a coconut to rot? Where was the coconut carried from? What? I don't know that. Suddenly, the man spontaneously combusted. Help me, I'm burning up. Somebody help me. Like many fictional characters, the man's reaction to burning up was to flail his arms about until he dropped lifelessly to the ground rather than stopping, dropping and rolling like any sensible person would do. Once he'd collapsed to the ground, the flames consumed whatever remained of him, while Deku, Todoroki and Bob gave each other curious looks. After this, they got in the boat, and Deku and Bob each grabbed an oar. Hold on, I know a faster way. Todoroki used her ice power to propel the boat across the lake in a matter of seconds. Then, despite not knowing exactly what to expect, Deku, Todoroki and Bob galloped onto the front gate when all of a sudden, Deku heard a yelp, so he turned around, and Bob. Noticing that Bob had been shot with an arrow, Deku cradled his body in his arms, while Todoroki created an ice shield to block further attacks. Bob, I promise you, you will not have died in vain. Just then, Deku heard a groaning sound, only to notice that Bob was still alive. Bob, I promise you, you will not have been mortally wounded in vain. Oh, I'm quite all right, actually, said Bob. I don't think that really broke the skin. Todoroki dropped her jaw. Wait, you can speak. Of course. Listen, Deku, Todoroki, my mission is complete here. Go on without me. You shall not go on any further, said a mysterious female voice. Deku, Todoroki and Bob turned to see who'd addressed them. A woman with short mint green hair and matching eyes. She wore a black bodysuit, a green hooded cape, chainmail armor, brown leather boots with a fur lining and a black mask obscuring the lower half of her face. Who are you? Said Deku. My name is Barrows *. All for One has enlisted my aid in his quest to conquer Sirlanya, and you shall perish for your intervention. No, said Todoroki, it's you who shall perish. Barrows raised her left hand, formed a bow with it, while Todoroki shot a blast of flames at her. However, Barrows managed to dodge it. Did you really think you could best me that easily? Said Barrows. Embrace your demise.
Deku, I'll distract her. Said Todoroki. You close in. Right. And thus, the battle between Deku and Todoroki versus Barrows began. Todoroki alternated between using her fire and ice not so much to fry or freeze Barrows, but to give Deku a chance to close in on her and land a finishing blow. However, in a curious turn of events, Barrows turned on Deku and attempted to shoot arrows at him. Fortunately, he was able to block them with his sword, though he needed a clean break in the arrows to really do her in. Then, just when things were looking hopeless, Barrows got careless with her timing and got her foot frozen by Todoroki, thus giving Deku that opportunity he really needed.
Newcastle Smash. In one quick, clean swipe, Deku beheaded Barrows. Well, she'll never get ahead in life, said Todoroki. Deku burst out laughing. What? Said Todoroki. Shoko, I didn't know you had a sense of humor. Todoroki shrugged. I didn't, either. Now then, let's head into the castle. Chapter 14. Red and White Sonia, Part 3. Todoroki used her fire to burn down the door leading into the castle, and her and Deku headed inside. Already, they noticed that it was quite dark and foreboding inside. They proceeded quickly yet carefully through the halls, keeping ever vigilant for any foes that might pop out at them. Thus far, there wasn't much in their way, but Deku could tell that there was something waiting for them. Sure enough, something did pop out at them, a low-tier Nomu. Almost immediately, Todoroki tried to freeze it, but shortly thereafter, it broke free of the ice. Shoko, leave its head exposed. Cutting off the head is the best way to defeat it. Right. As per Deku's command, Todoroki froze the Nomu again, leaving its head exposed, and acting quickly, Deku beheaded it. Come on, said Deku. And so, Deku and Todoroki hurried through the halls of the castle, twisting and turning their way ever closer to victory. For the most part, they had an easy jaunt, only having to deal with low-tier Nomus, though as they went on, they were encountering some mid-tier Nomus. These were tougher in that they broke through Todoroki's ice more quickly, but a single beheading swipe from Deku was still able to defeat them. Sometimes, Todoroki would switch things up and use her fire not only to heat up, but also to distract the Nomus so Deku could behead them. Overall, their chances of completing their quest were looking good at this point. Then, in one room. Oh no, that must be one of the upper-tier Nomus, said Deku. Cutting off its head won't do any good. Then I've got another idea. Try to keep it occupied. Right. Deku charged at the Nomu, not only valiantly attempting to dodge and parry its attacks, but also chopping off its limbs in an attempt to slow it down. Thus far, he seemed to be doing an all-right job of it, but it was clear that unless him and Todoroki ended this battle quickly, then they would be done for. However, Todoroki seemed to have an idea in mind. Flash Fire Fist. Todoroki delivered a seismic, white-hot punch to the Nomu, which burned it significantly. However, even then, it still possessed enough of itself to start regenerating. Deku, keep going. I'll have this thing done with soon enough. As per Todoroki's orders, Deku kept dodging the Nomu's attacks while hacking away at its limbs whenever he had the chance, and Todoroki herself proceeded to deliver more of those punches to the Nomu. Fortunately, their cooperation paid off, and the upper-tier Nomu was out of action for good. Todoroki wiped the sweat off her brow after the battle. You alright, Shoko? Todoroki nodded. I am. I'm just feeling really warm right now. Then let's take a short rest. Deku and Todoroki slumped against a wall embracing each other, while Todoroki used the cold portion of her quirk to create some ice cubes to cool herself off. Hey, Shoko. Yes. I just wanted to say, if we don't finish this quest alive, I'm really happy to have met you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Todoroki smiled. As do I. Todoroki gave Deku another kiss. No matter how many times she kissed him, he could never get over the weird, tingly feelings he got. Nevertheless, he welcomed them, knowing that the most beautiful woman in the world cared to go the distance with him. However, they didn't spend an exceedingly long time locked in affection. Gigantomachia shouldn't be too far, said Deku. Right. Deku and Todoroki headed down a long hallway, eventually reaching a golden door with intricate carvings on it. Together, they opened the door, and sure enough. Intruders, said Gigantomachia. Have you come here to be my food? No, Gigantomachia, we have come here to stop you from attacking innocent villagers, said Deku. Then you too shall be eaten in the name of my master. Gigantomachia led the battle off by making a crushing swipe in an attempt to stop Deku and Todoroki. However, the two heroes avoided the attack and countered with some attacks of their own. Unfortunately for them, no matter how hard they tried, the giant just shrugged off their attacks. This is impossible, said Todoroki, we'll never defeat him. Don't say, never, now. I think I have an idea, just keep him busy. Got it. And so, Todoroki alternated between using her flames and her ice on Gigantomachia in spite of the fact that neither of them particularly had much effect on him, while Deku dodged around and attempted to put his new idea into motion. However, Gigantomachia took notice of this and temporarily turned his focus away from Todoroki to try to crush Deku like a fly. Don't think you'll beat me that easily, said Gigantomachia. Everything I do is for my master. Oh yeah, said Deku. Does that include foul murder? Shut up. You know nothing of what you speak. Gigantomachia attempted to hammer a mighty fist down on Deku, but he evaded it, barely. Come on, Shoko, distract him. Fortunately for Deku, Todoroki had another ace up her sleeve. FLASHFREEZE Heatwave. Todoroki shot a massive blast of heat and cold at Gigantomachia. Despite its impressive power, the monster survived, though he got distracted. Stop annoying me. Gigantomachia prepared a swipe in an effort to take out Todoroki. Unbeknownst to him, Deku, having raised his sword, had an ace of his own, and his sword gave off an ethereal glow. This was it for Deku. Either he was going to do this, or him and Todoroki were doomed. Here goes, Sword of Light Smash. With one quick, decisive slash, Deku attempted to hack into Gigantomachia. At first, it appeared that his new ultimate move had been for naught, but then, Gigantomachia slowly fell apart into two halves, with Deku and Todoroki both huffing and puffing after the battle. That was an impressive move, said Todoroki. Thank you, All for One shouldn't be too far away now. Were you two looking for me? Deku and Todoroki turned to see no other than All for One standing at the opposite end of the room. You, said Todoroki. Yes, me, said All for One. And I see that your family has yet to abdicate from their throne. We'll never abdicate, not while there are good people willing to stand up and do the right thing. Then, you will die. Deku and Todoroki squared off against All for One in what would be the final battle to end all final battles. If they thought Gigantomachia was tough, then they clearly hadn't seen anything yet. For example, one thing they noticed about him was how easily he dodged their attacks when compared to Gigantomachia. Compounding this difficulty, on the occasions when they did land an attack, not only did the attacks fail to do any damage, but the resulting force got reflected back at them. Fortunately, Deku and Todoroki were some pretty tough cookies, but how long they could hold out was another matter entirely. So, Izuku Midoriya, you are the one whom the legendary All Might has chosen as his successor, said All for One. I shall take pleasure in destroying you, too. This ends here, All for One, said Deku. For you, yes. The battle raged on, with Deku and Todoroki using their best attacks. Again, no matter how hard they tried, All for One simply wouldn't die. Furthermore, All for One was striking back at them with some attacks of his own, such as coiling his muscles and shooting shockwaves at the two heroes. Another tactic he tried was attempting to stab Deku and Todoroki with long tendrils emanating from his fingers. The two heroes did their best to dodge and parry the blows, and while they were doing a good job so far, it was becoming clear that they wouldn't be able to hold out against All for One forever. You are beaten, said All for One. It is useless to resist. Don't let yourselves be destroyed as many others have been before you. That'll never happen, said Deku. You're the one who will be destroyed, said Todoroki. Suit yourself. Deku and Todoroki continued their valiant, epic fight against All for One. As the battle wore on, however, the two of them were feeling a creeping sensation of hopelessness. Where it was coming from was unknown to them, but the more they fought, the less they wanted to fight. Deku and Todoroki did their best to power through the feelings, but no matter how hard they tried, they found the fog of darkness enveloping their minds like nothing else could. This translated to them having slower reflexes. As a result of this, All for One ended up knocking Deku's sword out of his hands and knocking Deku himself to the ground before threatening him and Todoroki with his tendrils. There is no escape, Midoriya and Todoroki, said All for One. Don't make me destroy you. Join me, and together, we can bring peace to Sirlanya. We'll never join you, said Deku. Deku's right, said Todoroki. As long as we live, our fight won't end. Ha! You speak of resistance, and yet your voices tremble with fear. Why do you bother resisting at all? If only you knew my true power. Midoriya, All Might never told you what happened to your father. He told me enough, said Deku. He told me you killed him. No, I am your father. Deku blinked and shot a blank look at All for One. Wait, is this some kind of joke? Said Deku. What? Said All for One. How dare you accuse me of kidding you? I mean, I didn't tell Horikoshi that I wanted you to be my father. You fool. You don't just tell someone whom you want for a father. Well, what makes you think you're my father, then? Because my quirk is the opposite of yours, and by official mandate of the laws of villainy, it states quite clearly that the main villain is to be father to the main hero. Deku crossed his arms. Listen, powerful villains ripping off a famous line from a famous sci-fi movie is no basis for fatherhood. Being a parent derives from a man loving a woman and making love to her, not from some farcical attempt at parodying pop culture. Be quiet. Well, but you can't expect to be my father just because some other evil villain was father to another hero. Shut up. I mean, if I was a powerful villain and I told the hero that I was his father just because some sci-fi movie had a similar setup, they'd come to take me away, ha ha ha. Shut up, will you? Shut up. Ah, now I see the violence inherent in your system. Shut up. Deku gestured to All for One with his hands. Hey Shoko, look at the violence inherent in his system. Help. Help, I'm being repressed. Bloody peasant. Oh, what a giveaway. Did you hear that? Did you hear that, Shoko? That's what I'm talking about. Did you see him repressing me? You saw it, didn't you? Todoroki nodded. I did indeed. Shut up. Both of you, shut up. All for One attempted to launch another attack, but Todoroki aimed another flash freeze heatwave at him, distracting him long enough for Deku to grab his sword and prepare another special attack. Galaxy Smash. With his sword vibrating at 1,000,000 times the speed of light, Deku made one valiant swipe at All for One. That did it. Not only did All for One get vaporized, but all life as he knew it stopped instantaneously, and every molecule in his body exploded at the speed of light. Deku stood there, huffing and puffing as his mind got acclimated to hope again. Once he had calmed down sufficiently, he put his sword away and ran to Todoroki, who ran up to him as well. We did it, said Todoroki. Oh, Deku. Todoroki and Deku hugged and kissed each other again, elated that their quests had intertwined and ended in ultimate victory. However, it soon became clear that their lives would come to a premature end if they didn't do anything, for the castle started collapsing. Let's get out of here, said Deku. Deku and Todoroki ran as if they were running to the hills that Iron Maiden once sang about. The whole castle rumbled and stone blocks fell all around them. Despite the intense odds, Deku and Todoroki managed to escape the castle before it collapsed completely. Having gotten a fair distance away, the two of them looked back on the ruins of the castle. Well, I guess that's the end, said Todoroki. Deku nodded. Yeah. Say Shoko, I wanted to ask you something. Yes. Will you? Before Deku could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by police sirens and the sounds of screeching tires. Him and Todoroki turned around, only to notice a few Plymouth Furies in the NYPD's familiar blue and white paint scheme, plus an unmarked one in addition to a Boyertown merchandiser van. A bunch of NYPD officers, including some ESU officers, got out and pointed their guns at Deku and Todoroki. NYPD, freeze. Deku and Todoroki put their hands up. A lieutenant wearing a tan trench coat and a matching fedora approached the two, pointing his Colt Detective Special at them. All right, you two, up against the car and spread 'em, said the lieutenant. The other officers led Deku and Todoroki to one of the RMPs, where they put their hands on the hood and spread their legs, while the officers patted them down for weapons. One of them grabbed Deku's sword from him. Care to explain this? Said the officer. But I'm legally authorized to carry that, said Deku. Sure. You have the right to remain silent. If ya give up the right to remain silent, anything ya say can and will be used against ya in a court of law. You have the right to have an attorney present during questioning. If ya cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for ya without cost. Do you understand each of these rights I have explained to ya? I do, said Deku and Todoroki. Having these rights in mind, do ya wish to talk to us now? No, said Deku and Todoroki. Hey Shoko, what's up? Said Deku. Wah, Todoroki closed her laptop. Oh, hey Deku. I was just writing some medieval fanfiction. Nice. I didn't know you did any writing. May I read it when you're finished with it? Todoroki rubbed the back of her head. Yes, of course. Anyways, I'm going back to my dorm. Best of luck. Thank you. Deku kissed Todoroki before heading back to his dorm, while she smiled, knowing that she had the kindest, most handsome boy by her side. Chapter 15. What measure is kindness? Today was largely an ordinary day for Deku. He didn't really have anything of importance scheduled, so he just decided to take a walk around Musutafu City. He had no specific route planned, he just walked wherever his feet took him. Thus far, it was a peaceful walk, and it allowed him to concentrate on how beautiful the weather was and how calm he was feeling. As much as he enjoyed learning about how to become the best pro hero he possibly could be, there were times that he genuinely wanted to take a break from doing anything hero-related and just live life on his own terms. Thus far, it was a good day. Then, at one point, he saw Todoroki sitting on a bench curled up in the fetal position, so he quickened his pace and headed over to her. Shoko, is something wrong? Todoroki sighed. Unfortunately, yes. I've just been thinking about how everybody's been so nice to me lately, and I just feel like everyone's being nice to me just because I'm a girl. Deku sat down next to Todoroki. Oh? Why do you feel that way? Before I even came out as a girl, I just felt so invisible, even feared, like nobody wanted to be my friend, and now, Todoroki started to tear up. Deku put a hand on Todoroki's shoulder. That's not true. People like you not only because you had the courage to show your true colors, but also because you're a very kind, caring person who would gladly stand up to protect her friends. Deku, just stop. I get that you're trying to cheer me up, but your words can't change the facts. Deku frowned. Then let me be even more honest. It doesn't matter to me that you're a girl. Even if you were a boy, you would still be one of the best people I've ever had the fortune to know, and I would still love you very, very much. Todoroki gasped when she heard this. In this moment, it occurred to her that maybe her friends really did care about her no matter what. Not knowing what else to do, she loosened her stance and cried as she gave Deku a big hug, which he gladly returned. After so many years of suffering abuse at the hands of her father, she just desperately needed to let her emotions out, and knowing that she was with Deku, she felt safe in doing so. His words meant more to her than anything else in the whole world, and it was because of them that she had that much more faith not only in him, but in the rest of her friends as well. Furthermore, she felt so liberated in being able to cry like this. Despite being overwhelmed by Todoroki's sadness, Deku held onto her tightly as she continued to cry. In this moment, he had to wonder just how badly she hurt to cry this much. He wondered if she'd ever felt like him in all those years of him not having his own quirk and being bullied by Katsuki, Kacchan, Bakugo and other students for it. He speculated that this was exactly why they went so well together. Thinking back on when he told her that it was her quirk and not endeavors, he couldn't help but think how much change he'd brought about in her and how much happier both of them had become as a result. Eventually, Todoroki stopped crying, but Deku continued to hold on to her, only letting go when she finally did. Deku, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much your words mean to me. You're welcome, Shoko. I just didn't want you to feel lonely and unloved, you know? Todoroki pulled out a tissue, dried her eyes and blew her nose. Honestly, after hearing what you just said, I really don't care whether or not people like me because of what I am, because I know that as long as my friends are there for me, then I'll be there for them. Deku patted Todoroki on the back. That's the spirit. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to take you out for a drink at this cafe I know about. Todoroki smiled. Anything for the cutest, kindest boy ever. Deku chuckled. Then let's go. Deku took Todoroki by the hand and headed off to the cafe, their relationship looking brighter than ever.